The city inspector slammed his clipboard against the wooden railing, and the entire patio shuddered beneath 40 customers' feet. This structure is condemned effective immediately. Everyone out, now. Lena Parker felt her entire world crack along with those boards. 5 years of sacrifice, every penny she'd ever saved, her dead mother's legacy, all about to collapse into splinters and bankruptcy. And then a voice she'd only heard once before cut through the chaos. "That's not rot you're looking at, Inspector. That's deliberate sabotage, and I can prove it." The man who spoke wasn't a lawyer, wasn't a contractor she'd hired. He was just a stranger from the table next to hers, a single father on the worst blind date of his life, who'd noticed what everyone else had missed. If you want to know how a chance encounter saved two broken people from themselves, stay with me until the end. Drop a like and comment with your city. I want to see how far this story travels. The afternoon sun filtered through the wrought iron fence surrounding Magnolia Grounds Cafe, casting delicate shadows across worn wooden tables that had witnessed 1,000 first dates, 100 proposals, and countless ordinary Tuesdays. The patio buzzed with the gentle rhythm of espresso machines, quiet conversations, and the occasional burst of laughter from the corner where a group of college students debated something that seemed to matter only to them. Caleb Reed sat at table 7, watching his date's mouth move without registering a single word. Her name was Jessica, or Jennifer, he couldn't quite remember anymore, and she worked in marketing for a company that made something he'd already forgotten. She had perfectly highlighted hair, perfectly manicured nails, and a perfectly rehearsed laugh that emerged at precise intervals regardless of whether anything funny had been said. So then I told my manager, I said, "Brian, if you think I'm going to let accounting walk all over our Q3 projections again, you've got another think coming," she continued, pausing to sip her oat milk latte. Do you know what he said? Caleb didn't know. Caleb didn't care. Caleb was mentally calculating how many more minutes constituted a socially acceptable duration for a first date before he could claim a work emergency and flee. 23 minutes. He'd been sitting here for 23 minutes, and it felt like 23 years. He said, "Jessica, you're absolutely right. Can you believe that?" "Wow," Caleb managed, the word tasting like sawdust in his mouth. "That's really something." His phone sat face down on the table, silently mocking him. 3 text messages waited there from his buddy Marcus, who had set up this disaster with promises that Jessica was perfect for you, man. She's got her life together. No drama, exactly what you need. What Marcus had failed to mention was that having her life together apparently meant having absolutely no interest in anyone else's. In 45 minutes of conversation, if it could be called conversation, Jessica had not asked Caleb a single question about himself. Not what he did for work, not whether he had kids, not even how his day had been. She'd simply launched into a monologue about her life, her job, her spin class instructor, and her upcoming trip to Tulum with the girls. Caleb shifted in his chair, the old wood creaking beneath him. The sound drew his attention downward for a moment, and he noticed, almost unconsciously, the way a carpenter always noticed such things, a slight unevenness in the patio decking. The boards beneath table 7 sat perhaps a quarter-inch lower than those around table 8. Probably nothing. Old buildings settled, wood warped. It was the nature of things. Anyway, Jessica continued, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear, enough about work. Let's talk about something fun. What do you do for fun? Wait, let me guess. You seem like a golf guy. Am I right? You have that golf energy. Caleb did not play golf. Caleb had never played golf. Caleb spent his Saturdays building blanket forts with his 7-year-old daughter and his Sundays doing meal prep for the week ahead, because single parenting didn't leave room for 18 holes and overpriced polo shirts. "I'm not much of a golfer," he said. "Oh, that's too bad. My ex played golf. He was really good at it, like really good. He almost went pro." The ex. Every conversation in the past 20 minutes had somehow circled back to the ex, his job, his car, his golf game, his annoying habit of leaving towels on the bathroom floor. Caleb was beginning to suspect that Jessica wasn't actually on a date with him at all. She was on a date with the ghost of a man who'd clearly had the good sense to leave. "That's nice," Caleb said, glancing at his watch. 26 minutes now. Surely 26 minutes was enough. Surely he could claim that his daughter's babysitter had texted with an emergency. Surely. Oh my God, is that a Rolex? Caleb looked at his wrist, where his father's old Timex sat, battered and scratched, and keeping time the same way it had for 30 years. No, it's just, my ex had a Rolex, a Submariner. Do you know how much those cost? Like, a lot. But he said it was an investment. Caleb was going to kill Marcus. He was going to find his best friend and strangle him with the straps of his own tool belt. This wasn't a date. This was a hostage situation with good coffee. He shifted again, and the wood creaked louder this time. His eyes drifted to the next table over, where a woman sat alone, a laptop open in front of her, her fingers moving across the keyboard with focused intensity. She had dark hair pulled back in a loose bun and wore a simple white blouse that somehow looked more elegant than Jessica's designer ensemble. There was something about her posture, straight but not stiff, confident but not aggressive, that made her seem entirely at home in her own skin. She glanced up, and for a moment their eyes met. Caleb looked away quickly, embarrassed to have been caught staring. When he looked back, the woman had returned to her work, her expression unchanged. "Are you even listening to me?" Jessica's voice cut through his thoughts, sharp with the first genuine emotion she'd shown all afternoon. "Sorry," Caleb said. There's something with these boards. They're uneven." Jessica stared at him like he'd started speaking Mandarin. "The boards?" "The deck boards. They're sagging. See how that corner's lower than—" He stopped himself, recognizing the familiar glazed look in her eyes. "Never mind. You were saying about your ex?" "I was saying that maybe we should order food. The avocado toast here is supposed to be life-changing." Life-changing avocado toast. Caleb suppressed a sigh. He should have stayed home. He should have told Marcus no when he'd called 3 days ago with his pitch about getting back out there, and Lily needs a mom, and you can't hide in your workshop forever. Except he wasn't hiding. He was surviving. He was doing what needed to be done, waking up at 5 a.m. to prep lunches, dropping Lily at school, working 8 hours at whatever job site needed him, picking Lily up, helping with homework, making dinner, doing bath time, reading stories, collapsing into bed, and doing it all again. There was no room in that schedule for blind dates with women who talked about their exes and thought his dead father's watch was a knockoff Rolex. "I should probably check on my daughter," Caleb said, reaching for his phone. "You have a daughter?" The surprise in Jessica's voice was genuine, and for a moment Caleb felt something close to disappointment. 45 minutes, and she hadn't even known he was a father. She hadn't asked because she hadn't cared. "Yeah," he said. "Lily, she's 7. "Oh. Cute." Jessica's smile flickered, recalibrating. "So you're like a full-time single dad?" "Something like that." "That must be hard. My ex, well, I shouldn't talk about him anymore, but he never wanted kids. He said they were too much responsibility." "Your ex," Caleb thought, "sounds like a very wise man." He was about to make his excuses. "Sick babysitter, early morning tomorrow, lovely meeting you, take care," when the woman at the next table spoke. "If you're free," she said, not looking up from her laptop, "sit here." Caleb blinked. "Excuse me?" Now she looked up, and he saw her eyes clearly for the first time. They were the colors of good whiskey, warm and direct, with the kind of clarity that suggested she didn't miss much. "You look like a man who's been held hostage long enough. I could use the company, and she looks like she could use a reality check." Jessica's mouth fell open. "Excuse me?" "You've been talking about your ex for the past hour," the woman said calmly. "I've heard the whole thing. The golf, the Rolex, the apartment in Tribeca. You're clearly not over him, and this poor man is clearly too polite to tell you. How dare I wasn't— The avocado toast here is good," the woman continued, finally closing her laptop and giving Jessica her full attention. "But it's not going to fix your relationship issues. Might I suggest therapy instead of blind dates?" Jessica stood up so fast her chair scraped against the wooden boards, with a sound like a wounded animal. Her face had gone red, then white, then a mottled combination of both. "This is unbelievable. This is absolutely unbelievable." She snatched her purse from the table and glared at Caleb. "You're welcome to this crazy person. You two deserve each other." She stormed off, her heels clicking an angry rhythm across the patio until she disappeared through the front gate and into the street beyond. Caleb sat frozen, unsure whether he'd just witnessed a rescue or an assassination. The woman at the next table smiled, small, private, with just a hint of mischief at the corners. You gonna sit here or not? The offer has an expiration date. Caleb stood up, moved to her table, and sat down in the chair across from her. I'm Lena, she said, extending her hand. Caleb. Her grip was firm and warm, and she held his eyes when she shook it. Well, Caleb, she said, I apologize for inserting myself into your afternoon, but I've been listening to that woman talk about her golf playing, Rolex-wearing ex for the better part of an hour, and frankly, someone needed to put you out of your misery. Caleb laughed. A real laugh. The first one he'd felt all day. I appreciate the intervention, though I'm pretty sure she's going to give me a 1-star review on whatever dating app Marcus signed me up for. Marcus being the friend who set you up? My best friend. Soon to be my former best friend. Lena's smile widened slightly. Bad setup? The worst. I've been on 3 blind dates in the past year, all courtesy of Marcus, and they've all been disasters. The first one cried about her cat for 2 hours. The second one tried to recruit me into a pyramid scheme, and this one, he gestured toward the empty chair where Jessica had been sitting. This one talked about her ex like he was going to walk through the door any minute and take her back. And you sat through all of them. I'm too polite for my own good. My mom raised me to never walk out on a woman, even when she's trying to sell me essential oils. Lena leaned back in her chair, studying him with those whiskey-colored eyes. There was something assessing in her gaze, but not predatory. It was the look of someone who was used to reading people and didn't mind letting them know it. You're a carpenter, she said. It wasn't a question. Caleb's eyebrows rose. How'd you know? Your hands. She nodded toward them where they rested on the table. Calluses in all the right places, sawdust under your nails. You cleaned up for the date, but you couldn't get it all. And you noticed the boards. The boards? You've been staring at the patio decking since you sat down. Most people don't notice things like that unless they work with wood. Caleb looked down at the boards beneath his feet, then back up at Lena. They're sagging. See that corner? It's dropped maybe a 1/4 inch since the last time it was leveled. Could be nothing, old wood, weather expansion, but it could also be water damage, foundation settling, hard to tell without getting underneath. Lena's smile faded, replaced by something more complicated. How bad do you think it is? I don't know. I'd need to look closer to... He stopped, a realization clicking into place. Wait, why do you care? Because I own this place. Caleb stared at her. You own Magnolia Grounds. Bought it 5 years ago. Sunk every penny I had into it. She gestured at the patio around them. The wrought iron fence, the potted magnolias, the string lights that would glow like fireflies when the sun went down. It was a dump when I found it. Took me 2 years just to get it up to code. But the patio... She sighed, and for the first time Caleb saw a crack in her composure. The patio has always been a problem. The previous owner did a cheap renovation back in the 80s, and I've been paying for it ever since. Have you had it inspected? Every year. I've got one coming up next week, actually. City requires it for outdoor seating permits. Caleb's frown deepened. He looked at the boards again. Really looked this time, with the eye of a man who'd been building and repairing structures since he was old enough to hold a hammer. The sagging was subtle, but now that he was focused, he could see other signs too. A slight bow in the railings, a gap between 2 boards that was wider than it should be, the faintest discoloration near the base of a support post that suggested moisture where moisture shouldn't be. Can I look underneath? He asked. Lena's eyebrows rose. Now? If you don't mind, I won't charge you for looking. She studied him for a long moment, and Caleb could see her weighing options. The risk of letting a stranger poke around her business versus the risk of ignoring what might be a serious problem. Finally, she nodded. Follow me. She led him through the cafe, a cozy space filled with mismatched furniture, local art on the walls, and the rich aroma of fresh roasted coffee, and out a back door into a narrow alley. A wooden gate opened onto a cramped utility area where the guts of the building were exposed, pipes, electrical panels, and a dark crawl space beneath the elevated patio. It's not pretty down there, Lena warned. I've sent contractors in before, and they always come out covered in cobwebs and complaining. Caleb pulled out his phone and turned on the flashlight. I've been in worse. He got down on his hands and knees and crawled into the darkness. The space beneath the patio was maybe 3 feet high, enough to move around if you didn't mind getting intimate with the dirt. Caleb had minded once, when he was young and still cared about things like clean clothes and comfort. Now, after 15 years in the trade, he barely noticed. What he did notice, as his flashlight swept across the underside of the patio, made his stomach drop. The joists, the horizontal beams that supported the deck boards, were riddled with rot. Not the surface rot that came from age and weather, but deep structural decay that had eaten through the wood like cancer. Several of the connections had already failed, held together only by habit and hope. One of the main support beams had bowed visibly, and when Caleb pressed his hand against it, the wood gave way like wet cardboard. "How bad?" Lena's voice came from the crawlspace entrance, where she'd crouched down to peer into the darkness. Caleb didn't answer immediately. He was tracing the damage with his flashlight, trying to understand the pattern. Water damage, clearly, but not from rain. The moisture pattern was wrong. It was concentrated in specific areas, spreading outward from points that corresponded to... He crawled toward the back of the space, where the patio met the building's foundation. There, half hidden behind a mess of old pipes, he found the source. A drainage line had been redirected, recently by the look of it, within the past few months. Instead of carrying water away from the building, it now dumped directly onto the main support beam, creating a constant drip that had accelerated the rot tenfold. This wasn't neglect. This wasn't age. This was sabotage. Caleb crawled back out of the space and stood up, brushing dirt from his jeans. Lena was waiting, her arms crossed, her face tight with worry. "Well?" she asked. Caleb looked at her. This woman he'd known for less than an hour, who had rescued him from the worst blind date of his life, and then revealed that her livelihood was crumbling beneath her feet. "It's bad," he said. "But that's not the worst part." "What's the worst part?" "Someone did this on purpose." Lena went very still. "What do you mean?" "There's a drainage line under there that's been redirected. It's dumping water directly onto your main support beam. That kind of damage doesn't happen by accident. Someone had to physically move that pipe." "That's impossible. No one's been under there except the city inspector and the contractors I hired for..." She stopped, her face going pale. "For what?" "For the last renovation, 6 months ago. I hired a company to do some electrical work, and they said they needed access to the crawl space." Her voice had gone flat, the way people's voices went when they were processing something terrible. "The company was recommended to me by the previous inspector. He said they were the best in the city." Caleb felt something cold settle in his chest. "And this inspector, he's the same one doing your inspection next week?" "Yes. Gerald Hartley. He's been the city inspector for this district for 15 years. Has he ever given you trouble before?" Lena laughed, a bitter, broken sound. "Every year, he always finds something. Last year, it was a railing that was half an inch too short. The year before that, it was a support post that he said wasn't properly anchored. I fix whatever he flags, pay whatever fines he wants, and then I do it all again 12 months later." "Have you ever said no?" "No to what?" "To him. To whatever he's really asking for." Lena's eyes met his, and Caleb saw the truth there, the thing she hadn't wanted to say out loud. "He approached me last year," she said quietly. "Said he knew some people who were interested in the property. Developers who wanted to build a boutique hotel. He said if I sold, he could make the inspection problems go away. If I didn't, he'd make them worse. I told him to go to hell." Caleb nodded slowly. The pieces were falling into place now. The sabotage drainage line, the progressive structural damage, the upcoming inspection that would almost certainly find catastrophic failures. Gerald Hartley wasn't just a corrupt inspector. He was a man who destroyed what he couldn't steal. "You're going to fail that inspection," Caleb said. "I know." "He's going to condemn the patio, maybe the whole building." "I know." "You'll lose everything." Lena's jaw tightened. "I know." They stood in the alley, surrounded by pipes and garbage cans in the fading light of late afternoon, and Caleb felt something shift in his chest. This wasn't his problem. He had his own problems, a daughter to raise, a business to run, a life that was already stretched thin enough to snap. The smart thing to do was walk away, wish Lena luck, and forget he'd ever seen what was under that patio. But Caleb had never been particularly smart. "I can fix it," he said. Lena blinked. "What?" "The structural damage. I can fix it before the inspection." "The inspection is in a week." "I know. And you're a carpenter, not a magician. I'm a master carpenter with 15 years of experience and a very flexible schedule." He smiled, and for the first time since he'd arrived at Magnolia Grounds, it felt real. "Also, I'm extremely motivated by spite. Tell me more about Gerald Hartley." Lena stared at him for a long moment, her whiskey eyes searching his face for something. Sincerity, maybe, or sanity. Whatever she found seemed to satisfy her. "Come inside," she said. "I'll make you some coffee, and I'll tell you everything." Chit. The cafe was quiet now, the afternoon rush fading into the lull before dinner. Lena led Caleb to a corner booth and slid a cup of coffee across the table. Black, strong, exactly right. "Gerald Hartley," she began, "has been running this district for 15 years. He's got a reputation for being thorough, which is code for being impossible to please. Every business owner I know has a Hartley story. The fines, the delays, the inspections that somehow always find one more thing wrong. But you're the only one he's actively trying to destroy. Because I'm the only one who said no." Lena wrapped her hands around her own cup, the steam rising between them. "The developers he mentioned, Whitmore Properties, they've been buying up this whole block for years. The antique store on the corner, the bookshop across the street, the little bakery that used to be next door. All gone. All replaced with overpriced condos and boutique hotels. And you're the last holdout. My mother started this cafe 40 years ago. She ran it until she couldn't anymore, and then she left it to me." Lena's voice softened, and for a moment Caleb saw the woman beneath the composure, the grief, the determination, the stubborn refusal to let go. "I promised her I'd keep it alive. I'm not breaking that promise for Gerald Hartley or Whitmore Properties or anyone else." Caleb nodded. He understood promises like that. He'd made one himself 7 years ago, holding his wife's hand in a hospital room while the machines beeped their steady countdown. "Take care of our girl," she'd said. "Give her a good life." He'd been keeping that promise ever since, one day at a time, one homework assignment and one bedtime story, and one whispered "I love you" at a time. "The damage under your patio is extensive," he said. "I won't lie to you about that. The main support beam needs to be replaced, and at least a third of the joists are compromised. If we had a month, I could do it right. Tear everything out, rebuild from scratch, make it strong enough to last another 40 years. But we don't have a month. No, we have a week." Caleb pulled out his phone and opened the Notes app, sketching out a rough diagram of the patio's structure. The good news is that the damage isn't uniform. It's concentrated around the areas where the drainage line was redirected. If I can stabilize the main beam and sister the worst joists, I can get you to a point where the structure is safe enough to pass inspection. And the drainage line? I'll redirect it back where it belongs. Document everything. Take photos of the sabotage before I fix it. Lena's eyes sharpened. "For evidence." "Hartley's not the only one who can play games. If he tries to fail your inspection anyway, you'll have proof that the damage was deliberately caused. You can take it to the city, the press, whoever you need to. You think they'd care? I think people love a story about a corrupt official trying to destroy a family business. And I think Hartley knows that, which is why he's been so careful to make it look like neglect." Caleb met her eyes. "He's counting on you being alone, on having no one to fight for you." Lena was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice was steady, but there was something fragile beneath it. Hope, maybe, or just the exhaustion of someone who'd been fighting alone for too long. "Why are you doing this?" Caleb thought about the question. He thought about Marcus and his terrible blind dates, about Jessica and her golf-playing ex, about the way Lena had looked at him across that patio and seen a man who needed saving. He thought about Lily, who was probably finishing her snack at the babysitter's house right now, waiting for him to come home. "Because someone should," he said finally. "And because I'm good at it. And because my daughter keeps asking me why I don't have any friends, and I figure helping you fight a corrupt city inspector counts as making a friend." Lena's laugh was surprised and genuine, and it transformed her face completely. "That's a pretty low bar for friendship." You haven't met my other friends. This is actually a significant upgrade. She shook her head, still smiling. Okay, say I agree to this. Say I let you spend a week crawling around under my patio, fixing damage that shouldn't be there in the first place. What do I owe you? Caleb considered. Free coffee for life. That's it? That's it. You're either very generous or very crazy. Little of both, probably. He stood up, draining the last of his coffee. I need to go pick up my daughter, but I'll be back tomorrow morning early. I'll bring tools, materials, whatever I need. We'll get this done. Lena stood too, and for a moment they faced each other across the table, two strangers bound together by circumstance, stubbornness, and a shared enemy. Thank you, she said. I mean it. You didn't have to do any of this. Neither did you. He thought of Jessica, still somewhere in the city, probably complaining to her friends about the crazy woman who'd ruined her date. But you saw someone who needed help, and you helped. That's rare. So is this. Caleb smiled. See you tomorrow, Lena. He walked out through the cafe, past the mismatched furniture and the local art and the lingering smell of good coffee. The patio was empty now, the tables bare, the string lights waiting for night. He paused at the gate and looked back at the deck, at the boards that sagged, the railings that bowed, the structure that was slowly being murdered by a man who thought power meant taking what you wanted. 1 week. 7 days to fix what Gerald Hartley had spent months destroying. Caleb had faced worse odds. He'd just never had this much to lose, or this much to fight for. The babysitter's house was a 10-minute drive from Magnolia Grounds, located in a quiet residential neighborhood where the lawns were neat and the houses still had front porches. Caleb pulled into the driveway at exactly 5:47 p.m., which meant he was 3 minutes early for once. Mrs. Chen was waiting on the porch, a small figure beside her bouncing with barely contained energy. Daddy! Lily launched herself off the porch steps and into his arms, a whirlwind of brown curls and missing front teeth and pure, unfiltered joy. Caleb caught her and lifted her up, breathing in the smell of crayons and apple juice and whatever chaos she'd been creating all afternoon. Hey, Bug. Good day? The best day. Mrs. Chen let me help make cookies, and I only ate like 3 before they were done. And then we watched a movie about a dog who solves mysteries. And I drew you a picture of a shark, but it kind of looks like a banana, so I told Mrs. Chen it was a banana shark. A banana shark? That's a new species. I invented it. Caleb set her down and turned to Mrs. Chen, who was watching them with the fond, exhausted expression of someone who'd spent 6 hours containing a small hurricane. Was she okay? She was perfect, as always. Though I'd keep an eye on her sugar intake tonight, the cookies were enthusiastically sampled. 3 cookies, huh? Lily's eyes went wide with innocence. Maybe 4, but the 4th one was mostly burned, so it doesn't count. It doesn't count? Mrs. Chen said so. Mrs. Chen raised her hands in surrender. I may have said something to that effect. In my defense, she's very persuasive. Caleb laughed, signed the pickup sheet, and bundled Lily into the car with her backpack and her banana shark drawing and a Ziploc bag of only slightly burned cookies for the road. Daddy? Lily asked as he pulled out of the driveway. Yeah, Bug? How was your date? Caleb glanced at her in the rearview mirror. She was watching him with those sharp eyes, her mother's eyes, always seeing more than they should. It was interesting. Did you like her, the lady? Not really. She talked about her ex-boyfriend a lot. Lily wrinkled her nose. That's boring. Very boring. So you're not going to marry her? Caleb nearly choked on nothing. What? No, definitely not. Good. I don't want a stepmom who's boring. Lily kicked her feet against the seat, already moving on. Can we have pizza for dinner? We had pizza 2 days ago. Pizza's good for you. It has vegetables. The tomato sauce doesn't count as a vegetable. Mrs. Chen said vegetables don't count if they're burned. That doesn't apply to... Caleb sighed. Fine, pizza. But you're eating salad too. Lily pumped her fist in victory. Yes, Daddy, you're the best, even if you can't find a wife. Thanks, Bug. That means a lot. They drove in comfortable silence for a few blocks. the evening light turning golden through the windows. Caleb was thinking about joists and support beams and drainage lines when Lily spoke again. "Daddy?" "Yeah?" "Are you sad?" The question caught him off guard. He looked at her in the mirror again, at her small face creased with worry. "Why would I be sad?" "Because you're always working, and you never go on dates. And sometimes when you think I'm asleep, I hear you walking around the house really late." Caleb's heart clenched. He'd thought he was being quiet. He'd thought she didn't notice. "I'm not sad, Bug. I'm just busy." "That's what you always say." "Because it's true." Lily was quiet for a moment. Then, Mommy used to say that too, before she got sick. The words hit him like a physical blow. He had to grip the steering wheel to keep his hand steady. "Baby," he said carefully, "Mommy being busy wasn't what made her sick. That's not how it works." "I know. I just don't want you to be busy all the time and then not be here anymore." Caleb pulled the car over to the side of the road, put it in park, and turned around to face his daughter fully. Her eyes were bright with unshed tears, her lower lip trembling. "Lily, look at me." He reached back and took her small hand in his. "I am not going anywhere. Do you understand? No matter how busy I am, no matter how tired, I will always be here for you. That's a promise." "You promise?" "I promise." "Cross your heart?" "Cross my heart." Lily sniffled, wiped her nose with the back of her hand, and squeezed his fingers. "Okay, but you should still go on better dates. That lady sounded really boring." Caleb laughed, the tension breaking like a wave against rocks. "I'll work on it. And maybe find someone who likes sharks, or bananas, or banana sharks. I'll add it to the list." He turned back around and pulled the car back onto the road, but his mind was elsewhere. He was thinking about Lily's words, about the fear in her eyes, about all the nights he'd spent pacing the house while she slept because the silence was too loud and the bed was too empty. He was thinking about Lena, too, about the way she'd looked at him and seen someone worth saving, about the way she'd trusted him, a stranger, with the only thing she had left. Maybe that's what he needed. Not a wife, not a girlfriend, not whatever Marcus kept trying to set him up with, just someone to fight alongside, someone to remind him that he wasn't as alone as he felt. But the pizza arrived at 7:15, and by 7:45, Lily had eaten 2 slices, half a salad, and 3 more cookies from the Ziploc bag. Caleb put on a movie about a talking dog, her choice, settled beside her on the couch, and watched her eyelids grow heavy as the sugar crash finally hit. "Daddy?" she mumbled, her head lolling against his shoulder. "Yeah, Bug? I'm glad your date was boring." "Why's that?" "Because now you're home, with me." Caleb kissed the top of her head, breathing in the smell of her shampoo and the fading sweetness of cookies. "Me too, Bug. Me too." She was asleep within minutes, her breathing deep and even. Caleb carried her to bed, tucked her in with her stuffed elephant and her nightlight, and stood in the doorway for a long moment, watching her sleep. His little girl, his whole world. He had a week to save a stranger's cafe, a week to fight a corrupt inspector, repair deliberate sabotage, and somehow pull off a miracle. It was insane. It was impossible. But as Caleb walked back to the living room and pulled out his phone to start researching structural repair techniques, he realized something. For the first time in years, he felt awake. The next morning, Caleb dropped Lily at school, stopped at the hardware store for supplies, and arrived at Magnolia Grounds by 8 a.m. The cafe wasn't open yet, but Lena was already there, unlocking the gate with a cup of coffee in her hand. She looked different in the morning light, softer somehow, without the armor of composure she'd worn the day before. Her hair was down, falling past her shoulders in dark waves, and she was wearing jeans and a flannel shirt that suggested she'd been expecting to get dirty. "You came," she said. "I said I would." "People say a lot of things." She handed him the coffee. Black, strong, perfect. "I wasn't sure you'd actually show." "I'm a man of my word." Caleb took a sip and nodded toward the patio. "Ready to get started?" Lena looked at the deck, at the tables and chairs that would need to be moved, the boards that would need to be pulled up, the crawl space that would need to be conquered. Ready as I'll ever be. They worked side by side through the morning, Caleb in the darkness beneath the patio, and Lena above, passing down tools and supplies as he called for them. He documented the sabotage first, taking photos of the redirected drainage line from every angle, noting the fresh marks on the pipes where they'd been recently moved. "This was done in the last 6 months," he called up through the deck boards. "The corrosion pattern is consistent with constant water exposure, but the pipe itself isn't corroded. Someone moved it recently and aimed it directly at your main support beam." "Can you prove it was Hartley's contractors?" "Not directly, but if we find out who did the electrical work, and we can show that the drainage line wasn't redirected before they came." He trailed off, another thought occurring. "Lena, do you have the paperwork from that renovation?" "Somewhere." "Why?" "Because if the contractor wasn't licensed for plumbing work, and they touched that drainage line without permission, that's a violation. A big one, the kind that could get their license pulled." Lena was quiet for a moment. When she spoke, her voice was thoughtful. "And if Hartley recommended them, he might have recommended them for a reason." "Exactly." "I'll dig up the paperwork tonight." Caleb nodded, even though she couldn't see him, and got back to work. The main support beam was worse than he'd feared. The rot had eaten through nearly half its thickness, leaving a shell of wood that could collapse at any moment. He worked carefully, installing temporary supports to take the load, then began the delicate process of sistering new lumber alongside the damaged sections. It was slow, painstaking work, the kind that required patience and precision and an absolute refusal to cut corners. By noon, he was covered in dirt, his muscles ached, and he'd made it through maybe a quarter of the repairs. Lena brought him lunch, a sandwich from the cafe, thick with turkey and avocado, and some kind of spicy aioli that made his taste buds sing. They sat on the edge of the crawl space entrance, eating in comfortable silence while the noon sun beat down on the empty patio. "You're good at this," Lena said. "I should be. I've been doing it since I was 16. 16? That's young. My dad was a carpenter, his dad before him. It's in the blood, I guess." Caleb took another bite of his sandwich. "I used to spend my summers helping him on job sites. Learned more from him than I ever did in school." "Is he still around?" Caleb shook his head. "Passed 5 years ago. Heart attack. He was on a job site when it happened. Fell off a ladder he'd climbed 1,000 times. He smiled, but it was bittersweet. He would have hated dying any other way." Lena was quiet, and Caleb appreciated that she didn't try to fill the silence with empty condolences. "My mother died 3 years ago," she said finally. "Cancer, slow and awful. By the end, she couldn't remember who I was." She looked at the cafe behind them, at the windows and the door, and the life she'd built. But she remembered this place. Even when she forgot my name, she knew every table, every chair. She'd ask me if I'd restock the sugar, if the espresso machine was clean. "That's why you can't let it go." "That's why I can't let it go." They sat together, two people who'd lost too much, eating sandwiches in the ruins of something worth saving. The afternoon passed in a blur of sawdust and sweat. Caleb worked until his hands were raw, until the light began to fade and Lena called down to tell him it was time to stop. He emerged from the crawl space covered in grime, his back screaming, his arms heavy with exhaustion. But he'd made progress. Real progress. The main beam was stabilized, the worst of the joists were sistered, and the drainage line was back where it belonged. "Same time tomorrow?" he asked, washing his hands at the utility sink while Lena watched from the doorway. "You're coming back?" "I said I'd fix it. I'm going to fix it." Lena shook her head slowly, something like wonder in her eyes. "I don't understand you, Caleb Reed." "Nothing to understand. I'm just a carpenter who hates bullies and loves a challenge." "And the free coffee?" "That too." He grabbed his tools, said goodnight, and drove to pick up Lily from Mrs. Chen's. His daughter talked the whole way home about a science project involving volcanoes, and Caleb listened with half an ear while his mind churned through timber sizes and load calculations. That night, after Lily was in bed, he spread his plans across the kitchen table and worked until midnight, mapping out the remaining repairs. 4 more days. 4 more days to make Magnolia ground strong enough to survive Gerald Hartley's inspection. 4 more days to save Lena Parker's dream. Whooped. Day 2, Day 3, Day 4. Caleb fell into a rhythm. Mornings with Lily, breakfast, school drop-off, the precious normalcy of a child's laughter. Then Magnolia Grounds, where the darkness beneath the patio became as familiar as his own workshop. Lunch with Lena, talking about everything and nothing while the sun tracked across the sky. Afternoons of grueling work, every muscle protesting, every repair bringing the structure closer to salvation. Evenings with Lily, dinner, homework, bedtime stories about brave knights and clever princesses. He was exhausted in a way he hadn't been in years, but it was a good exhaustion, the exhaustion of purpose. Lena worked alongside him whenever she could, learning to hold boards steady while he nailed them in place, handing him tools before he asked for them. She told him about her mother, about the early years of the cafe, about the dreams she'd had before Gerald Hartley started trying to take them away. And slowly, carefully, like a house being built one nail at a time, something else began to take shape between them. It wasn't romance, not yet anyway. It was deeper than that and quieter, the kind of trust that comes from working together, from depending on each other, from sharing silence as easily as words. On the evening of Day 4, Caleb emerged from the crawl space to find Lena waiting with 2 glasses of wine and a look on her face that he couldn't quite read. "We should talk," she said. He took the glass, wiped the dirt from his hands, and sat down beside her on the patio that no longer sagged, that no longer creaked, that would hold the weight of 100 customers without complaint. "What's wrong?" "Nothing's wrong." She took a sip of her wine, her eyes fixed on the setting sun. "I found the paperwork, the contractor who did the electrical work. They weren't licensed for plumbing. They shouldn't have touched that drainage line." "That's good. That's evidence." "I know, but there's more." She reached into her pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper. "I did some digging, called in some favors. Turns out Gerald Hartley has a brother." Caleb's eyebrows rose. "A brother?" "Robert Hartley. He's the CEO of a company called Whitmore Properties." The name hit Caleb like a slap. "The developers." "The same ones who've been buying up this block for years. The same ones who want my cafe." "So Hartley's not just taking bribes. He's working for his own family." "Worse than that." Lena's voice had gone cold, the warmth of the wine forgotten. "I talked to some of the other business owners who sold, the ones who had inspection problems before they agreed to sell. They all described the same pattern: progressive damage, repeated failures, mounting fines, and they all mentioned the same contractor showing up to help with repairs." "Let me guess, the same contractor who worked on your electrical." "The same one." Caleb leaned back, processing. Gerald Hartley wasn't just corrupt. He was running a scheme. Sabotage the buildings, fail the inspections, crush the owners with fines, and fear until they sold to his brother's company. It was elegant in its cruelty. And it ended here. "We need to go public with this," Caleb said. "The photos, the paperwork, the pattern. If we can show that Hartley has been systematically destroying businesses to benefit his family." "I know, but Caleb..." Lena's voice cracked just slightly, and he saw the fear beneath her determination. "If we go public and it doesn't work, if Hartley has connections we don't know about, if the city protects him, I lose everything. The cafe, my home, my mother's legacy, everything." Caleb reached out and took her hand. It was an impulsive gesture, one he hadn't planned, but it felt right. "You won't lose everything," he said, "because you won't be fighting alone." Lena looked at him, her whiskey eyes bright with unshed tears. "Why?" she asked. "Why do you care so much?" "Because you reminded me what it feels like to fight for something." He squeezed her hand. "And because my daughter asked me why I never have any friends, and I told her I was working on it." Lena laughed, a wet, broken sound that was somehow still beautiful. "That's a terrible reason." "I know, but it's true." They sat there as the sun went down and the string lights flickered to life above them, 2 people holding on to each other in the gathering dark. Tomorrow was the inspection. Tomorrow, everything would change. The morning of Day 5 dawned gray and cold, the kind of weather that felt like a warning. Caleb arrived at Magnolia Grounds at 6 a.m., 2 hours before the inspection, and did one final sweep of the repairs. Everything was solid. Everything was right. He'd done the work, documented the sabotage, and prepared for battle. Lena met him at the gate, a folder clutched in her hands. Her face was pale but composed, the armor back in place. "Ready?" he asked. "No, but let's do it anyway." The first customers began to arrive at 7:30, filling the patio tables with the normal rhythms of morning, coffee and conversation, and the comfortable bustle of ordinary life. They didn't know what was coming. They didn't know that in less than an hour, a man with a clipboard would try to destroy all of this. At 8:15, a black sedan pulled up to the curb. Gerald Hartley stepped out. He was smaller than Caleb had expected, a wiry man with thinning hair and the kind of smile that never reached his eyes. He carried a clipboard and a measuring tape and the absolute confidence of someone who had never been told no. "Ms. Parker," he said, extending his hand with practiced warmth. "Ready for your inspection?" "As always, Mr. Hartley." The inspector's eyes swept the patio, and Caleb saw the moment he noticed that something was different. The boards weren't sagging, the railings weren't bowing. The structure that should have been collapsing was instead solid and proud. "You've done some work," Hartley said, his smile tightening. "We fixed a few things." "We?" His gaze landed on Caleb, who was leaning against the fence with his arms crossed. "And who might you be?" "Caleb Reed, master carpenter, licensed and insured." "I see." Hartley's smile didn't waver, but his eyes had gone cold. "Well, let's see what kind of work you've done." He walked the patio like a predator, testing every board, measuring every railing, looking for any excuse to condemn. Caleb watched him, noting the growing frustration in his movements. The structure held. Every board, every beam, every connection. Hartley completed his circuit and turned back to Lena, his face carefully neutral. "The visible work appears adequate," he said, "but I'll need to inspect beneath the patio to verify the structural integrity." "Of course." Lena's voice was steady. "Mr. Reed will show you the way." Caleb led the inspector to the crawlspace entrance. Hartley descended into the darkness, his flashlight sweeping across the new lumber and the sistered joists and the redirected drainage line. For a long moment, there was only silence. Then Hartley emerged, his face pale, his composure finally cracked. This is different," he said. "The damage I saw 6 months ago, the damage was deliberate." Lena stepped forward, the folder open in her hands. "Someone redirected the drainage line to destroy my main support beam. Someone who came highly recommended. By you." Hartley's mouth opened and closed. "I don't know what you're—" "We have photos," Caleb said, pulling out his phone. "Before and after. The pipe marks are fresh. The contractor you recommended wasn't licensed for plumbing, and I documented everything." You can't possibly think—" "I think," Lena said, her voice cutting like glass, "that you've been sabotaging businesses in this district for years. I think you've been failing inspections to force owners to sell to Whitmore Properties, a company owned by your brother, Robert Hartley." The inspector's face went white. "That's a lie. It's the truth. And if you fail this inspection, I'm going to the city, the press, and the state licensing board with everything I have." Lena closed the folder with a snap. "So what's it going to be, Mr. Hartley? Are you going to do your job honestly for once? Or are you going to make this very, very public?" Gerald Hartley stood in the morning light, surrounded by customers who had gone quiet, their coffee forgotten as they watched the drama unfold. For a moment, Caleb thought he might fight, might try to bluff his way through, might call Lena's bluff in hope she was too afraid to follow through. But Hartley was a coward at heart. He'd spent 15 years bullying people who couldn't fight back. He'd never learned what to do when someone stood their ground. "The structure passes inspection," he said, his voice barely a whisper. "Temporary approval granted." He scribbled something on his clipboard, shoved the paper at Lena, and walked away without another word. His sedan peeled away from the curb and disappeared around the corner. The patio erupted. Customers were cheering, clapping, a few even standing up from their tables to shake Lena's hand. She stood in the middle of it all, the inspection approval clutched in her fingers, tears streaming down her face. Caleb found himself grinning like an idiot. "We did it," she whispered. "You did it. I just fixed some boards." "You fixed everything." She threw her arms around him, and he caught her, holding her close while the applause washed over them. "Caleb, I don't know how to thank you. Free coffee for life, remember?" She laughed into his shoulder, and for a moment, the world was perfect. 3 weeks later, Magnolia Grounds was transformed. The investigation into Gerald Hartley had exploded beyond anything Caleb or Lena had anticipated. Once she went public with her evidence, other business owners came forward with their own stories. The pattern was undeniable: 15 years of sabotage, coercion, and corruption. Hartley was suspended pending investigation, his brother's company was under federal scrutiny, and the mayor had announced a full review of every inspection in the district. Lena's Cafe had become famous, at least locally, the place where a corrupt inspector had finally met his match. Customers came from all over the city to sit on the patio, to hear the story, to order the avocado toast that was allegedly life-changing. Caleb came too, every morning before work, every evening after picking up Lily from Mrs. Chen's. He sat at what had become his table, the one with the best view of the magnolias, where the string lights caught the last rays of sunset. Lily did her homework beside him while Lena brought them coffee and cookies and the occasional slice of pie. "Daddy," Lily said one evening, looking up from her math worksheet, "is Lena your girlfriend?" Caleb choked on his coffee. "What? No, we're friends. But you come here every day, because the coffee's good, and you smile a lot when she's around." "I smile at a lot of things." "Not really." Lily's expression was skeptical, which was a lot for a 7-year-old. "You mostly look grumpy." "I do not look grumpy." "You kind of do," Lena said, appearing at their table with a fresh pot of coffee and a grin. "The brooding carpenter thing works for you, though." Caleb glared at her. She winked back. "See?" Lily said triumphantly. "She's totally your girlfriend." "She's not. We're not." Caleb gave up and buried his face in his hands. Lena laughed and ruffled Lily's hair. "What do you say, kiddo? Should I be your dad's girlfriend?" Lily considered this seriously. "Do you like banana sharks?" "I don't know what that is, but I'm willing to learn." "Then you're approved." "Well," Lena said, sliding into the seat beside Caleb, "I guess that settles it." Caleb looked at her. This woman who had rescued him from the worst blind date of his life, who had trusted him with her mother's legacy, who had fought beside him against impossible odds. "I guess it does," he said, and for the first time in years he didn't feel the need to escape. He felt like staying. The weeks following Gerald Hartley's suspension unfolded like a fever dream. Interviews with local news stations, visits from city council members, and a seemingly endless parade of curious customers who wanted to see the cafe that had taken down a corrupt inspector. Lena navigated it all with the same quiet composure she'd shown the morning of the inspection, though Caleb could see the exhaustion accumulating behind her eyes. He noticed things like that now, the way she rubbed her temples when she thought no one was watching, the slight hitch in her step at the end of a 14-hour day, the forced brightness in her smile when yet another reporter asked her to retell the story for the 6th time that week. "You need to slow down," he told her one evening, finding her alone in the kitchen after closing, staring at a stack of invoices that seemed to have multiplied since the last time he'd seen them. Lena looked up, her hair escaping from its bun, a smudge of flour on her cheek from helping with the morning pastries. "I can't slow down. We're busier than we've ever been. The insurance company still hasn't finalized the claim, and I have 3 different lawyers calling me about the Hartley investigation. None of that will matter if you collapse." "I'm not going to collapse." "You had coffee for breakfast, coffee for lunch, and unless I'm wrong, you're planning to have coffee for dinner." Lena glanced at the mug in her hand, then back at him. "Coffee has calories." "That's not how nutrition works." "It's how my nutrition works." Caleb walked over, gently took the mug from her hand, and set it on the counter. "When was the last time you ate an actual meal, something that didn't come from your own display case?" Lena opened her mouth to answer, then closed it again. Her brow furrowed. "Tuesday? It's Friday. Is it?" "Lena." She sighed, the sound carrying the weight of 3 weeks of impossible pressure. I know. It's just, everything is happening so fast. The attention, the legal stuff, the business. I keep waiting for the other shoe to drop." "What other shoe?" "I don't know. That's what scares me." She leaned against the counter, her shoulders slumping. Gerald Hartley didn't work alone. His brother's company is huge. They have lawyers, connections, resources I can't even imagine. What if they come after me? What if they find some way to make this all go away and I'm left with nothing but a target on my back? Caleb studied her face, the worry lines that hadn't been there a month ago, the shadows under her eyes, the tremor in her hands that she was trying to hide. He remembered the woman who had interrupted his disastrous blind date with such casual confidence, who had trusted a stranger with her mother's legacy, who had stood her ground against a man who'd been bullying business owners for 15 years. That woman was still there, but she was drowning. "Come with me," he said. "What?" "Right now, come with me." "Caleb, I have invoices. The invoices will still be here tomorrow. Right now, you're coming with me." He took her hand before she could argue and led her out through the back door, through the alley, and around to the front of the cafe where his truck was parked. The evening air was cool and sweet with the scent of magnolias. "Where are we going?" Lena asked as he opened the passenger door. "To eat actual food, and then to not think about Gerald Hartley or lawyers or insurance claims for at least 2 hours." 2 hours? "Caleb, I can't just—" "You can. You will. Get in the truck." She stared at him for a long moment, something shifting in her expression. Then, slowly, a smile crept across her face, the first real smile he'd seen from her in days. "You're very bossy for someone who works for free coffee." "I'm very bossy in general. Ask my daughter." Lena laughed and climbed into the truck. Caleb drove them to a small Italian restaurant on the other side of town, a family-owned place he'd been coming to since Lily was a baby. The owner, Maria, greeted him like a long-lost son and immediately ushered them to a quiet corner booth, pressing fresh bread and olive oil into their hands before they'd even sat down. "She seems to know you," Lena observed, watching Maria bustle back to the kitchen. "I did some work on her patio a few years back, rebuilt the whole thing after a storm took out the original. She's been trying to adopt me ever since." "She has good taste." Caleb felt heat rise to his cheeks and covered it by studying the menu he'd memorized years ago. "The lasagna here is incredible. Best I've ever had." "Better than your mom's?" "My mom couldn't cook to save her life. She used to burn water." Lena laughed again, and something in Caleb's chest loosened. This was what she needed. Not more pressure, not more problems. Just a quiet dinner with someone who didn't want anything from her except her company. They ordered wine and pasta and talked about everything except the cafe. Lena told him about her childhood, growing up in the apartment above Magnolia Grounds, learning to make coffee before she learned to ride a bike. She talked about her father, who'd left when she was 10 and never looked back. About her mother, who'd built the cafe from nothing and run it for 30 years through sheer force of will. "She was the strongest person I ever knew," Lena said, swirling the wine in her glass. "She never complained, never asked for help, never let anyone see her struggle. I thought that was what strength looked like. Just enduring. Alone." "And now?" Lena looked at him, her eyes soft in the candlelight. "Now, I'm not so sure." Caleb thought about his own years of enduring. The sleepless nights after Sarah died, when Lily was still in diapers, and the grief was so heavy he could barely breathe. The early mornings and late nights, working himself to exhaustion because stopping meant feeling, and feeling meant drowning. He told himself he was being strong for his daughter, but maybe he'd just been hiding. "I spent 5 years trying to do everything alone," he said quietly. "After my wife died. I thought asking for help meant admitting I couldn't handle it, that somehow I was failing Lily if I wasn't perfect. What changed? Lily asked me why I never had any friends." He smiled at the memory. His daughter's small face, so serious, asking questions he didn't have answers for. "She said I seemed lonely, and I realized she was right. I was so busy surviving that I'd forgotten how to live." Lena reached across the table and touched his hand. "And now?" "Now I'm sitting in a restaurant with a beautiful woman, eating lasagna and drinking wine, while my daughter is at a sleepover and my work can wait until Monday." "A sleepover?" "Mrs. Chen's granddaughter is in Lily's class. They're having a girls' night. I'm told this involves pizza, nail polish, and several animated movies I'm not sophisticated enough to appreciate." "You let her stay out on a Friday night? What happened to the overprotective single dad I met?" "He's still here. He just checked the emergency contacts 3 times and made Mrs. Chen promise to call if anything goes wrong. Lena squeezed his hand, laughing. That sounds more like it. The pasta arrived, and they ate in comfortable silence for a while. Caleb watched Lena's face as she tasted the lasagna, saw the tension slowly drain from her shoulders as the wine and the food and the quiet conversation worked their magic. "This is nice," she said finally. "I can't remember the last time I did this." "Did what?" "Just sat, without a to-do list running in my head, without waiting for someone to need something from me." "That's because you spend all your time taking care of everyone else." "Someone has to." "Someone else can too. That's what I'm trying to tell you." Lena set down her fork and looked at him, really looked, the way she had that first day on the patio when she'd seen a man trapped in a terrible date and decided to rescue him. "Why do you care so much, Caleb? About me? About the cafe? About any of this? We've known each other for less than 2 months." Caleb considered the question. He could give her the easy answer, that he'd gotten invested in the project, that he hated bullies, that he had nothing better to do. All of those things were true in a way, but they weren't the whole truth. "When I was under your patio that first day," he said slowly, choosing his words carefully, "I saw what someone had done. The deliberate damage, the sabotage, and I thought about what it would feel like to have everything you'd built, everything you cared about, systematically destroyed by someone who was supposed to protect it. And I thought about Lily, about Sarah, about all the things I would do to protect what I love." He met her eyes. "You were fighting alone, Lena. You'd been fighting alone for years. And I know what that's like. I know how it eats at you, how it makes you think you're the only one who can carry the weight, because if you let go, even for a second, everything will fall apart. But it doesn't have to be that way. No, it doesn't." They sat in silence for a moment, the weight of his words settling between them like something solid and real. "I'm scared," Lena said finally, her voice barely above a whisper. "I've been scared for so long I forgot what it feels like to not be scared. And now everyone's watching. Everyone expects me to be this crusader, this warrior who took down the corrupt inspector, but I'm just a woman who didn't want to lose her mother's cafe." Caleb reached across the table and took both her hands in his. "That's exactly who you should be. You don't have to be a warrior. You don't have to be perfect. You just have to be you. The woman who noticed a stranger needed help and didn't hesitate to give it." Tears welled in Lena's eyes. "You make it sound so simple." "It is simple. It's just not easy." She laughed, a wet and broken sound, and squeezed his hands. "When did you get so wise?" "I have a 7-year-old. They ask a lot of hard questions." The laughter turned real, and the tears spilled over, and Caleb handed her his napkin without comment. They stayed at the restaurant until Maria kicked them out at closing time, and then they sat in his truck in the parking lot, talking about nothing and everything while the stars came out overhead. It was nearly midnight when Caleb finally pulled up in front of the cafe. The building was dark, the patio empty, the magnolias silver in the moonlight. "Thank you," Lena said, "for tonight, for everything. Anytime." She unbuckled her seatbelt but didn't move to get out. Instead, she turned to face him, her expression unreadable in the dim light. "Caleb, I need to tell you something." His heart stuttered. "Okay. I got a call today from Whitmore Properties." The name hit him like ice water. "What did they want?" "To make a deal." Her voice was flat, controlled, the way it got when she was trying not to feel something. "They said the investigation is going to drag on for months, maybe years. They said the legal fees alone will bankrupt me before it's over. And they offered to buy the cafe, at a fair price, they said, to make it all go away." Caleb felt rage building in his chest, hot and familiar. "They're trying to intimidate you." "I know. After everything they did, after everything we exposed, they're still trying to take your cafe." "I know. What did you tell them?" Lena smiled, and in that smile, he saw the woman who had stood her ground against Gerald Hartley. "I told them to go to hell." Caleb exhaled, relief flooding through him. "Good. But Caleb, They're not wrong about the legal fees. The investigation is already costing me more than I can afford. I've been dipping into my savings, my retirement, everything I have. If this goes on much longer, then we'll figure it out. How? I don't know yet, but we will. She shook her head. You can't keep fixing my problems. I'm not fixing your problems. I'm helping you carry them. There's a difference. Lena was quiet for a long moment. Then she leaned across the center console and kissed him. It was soft and brief and over before Caleb could fully process what was happening, but it left him breathless all the same. What was that for? He asked, his voice rough. For being you. She opened the door and stepped out into the night. Good night, Caleb. Good night, Lena. He watched her walk to the cafe's front door, unlock it, and disappear inside. The lights came on in the apartment above, a warm glow against the darkness. Caleb sat in his truck for a long time, his lips still tingling, his heart still racing. He was in trouble. Deep, wonderful, terrifying trouble. And he wouldn't have it any other way. The next morning, Caleb woke to the sound of his phone buzzing insistently on the nightstand. He groped for it, squinting at the screen, expecting a message from Mrs. Chen about Lily. Instead, he found a text from Marcus. Call me. Now. Important. Caleb frowned and dialed. Finally, Marcus answered on the first ring. I've been trying to reach you for an hour. It's 6 a.m. on a Saturday. Normal people are asleep. Normal people aren't dating cafe owners who are on the news every other day. Have you seen the papers? I haven't seen anything. I literally just woke up. Check your email. I sent you the link. Caleb put Marcus on speaker and opened his email, clicking on the link his friend had sent. The headline made his blood run cold. Magnolia Grounds hero accused of sabotaging competitor. What the hell is this? Caleb demanded. It's a hit piece. Someone fed the press a story that Lena Parker deliberately damaged her own cafe to frame Gerald Hartley. They're saying she hired you to stage the whole thing, the repairs, the evidence, the confrontation. They're making it sound like a conspiracy. Caleb scrolled through the article, his rage building with every line. Anonymous sources, unverified claims, careful insinuations designed to plant doubt without making accusations that could be disproven. This is Whitmore Properties, he said. They're trying to discredit her. Of course they are. The investigation was hurting them, so they're fighting back. But Caleb, listen to me. This isn't just about Lena. They're going after you too. What do you mean? Third paragraph. Read it. Caleb found the section Marcus was referring to and felt his stomach drop. Reed, a single father with a history of financial difficulties, was reportedly paid a substantial sum for his role in the alleged scheme. Sources close to the investigation suggest he may have been motivated by more than altruism. They're saying I was paid off. They're saying you were desperate. They're painting you as a guy who was broke and willing to do anything for money. That's not true. I know it's not true. But Caleb, these things have a way of sticking. Once the accusation is out there, it doesn't matter if it's proven wrong. People remember the headline, not the correction. Caleb closed his eyes, trying to think through the rage clouding his brain. Whitmore Properties was playing hardball. They'd realized that the direct approach wasn't working, so they were switching to character assassination instead. I have to tell Lena. She probably already knows. This dropped an hour ago. If she's not blowing up your phone, she's probably putting out fires. Caleb hung up without saying goodbye and called Lena. It went straight to voicemail. He tried again, same result. He showered, dressed, and was out the door in 10 minutes, breaking every speed limit on his way to Magnolia Grounds. When he arrived, he found a small crowd gathered outside. Reporters, cameras, curious neighbors. The cafe was dark. The closed sign hanging in the window. Caleb pushed through the crowd, ignoring the shouted questions, and pounded on the front door. Lena, it's Caleb. Let me in. For a long moment, nothing. Then the door cracked open and Lena's face appeared pale and drawn. You shouldn't be here. I'm not leaving. Caleb, the press, let them watch. I don't care. She hesitated, then stepped back to let him in. He slipped through the door and she locked it behind him. The cafe was dim, the chairs still stacked on tables from last night's closing. Lena walked to the counter and leaned against it, her arms wrapped around herself. I assume you saw the article, she said. Marcus called me. My phone hasn't stopped ringing, Reporters, lawyers, the city council. Everyone wants a statement. What are you going to say? I don't know. Her voice cracked. I don't know what to say. They're twisting everything we did, everything you did, into something ugly. They're making me look like a liar, and you look like a criminal. Caleb crossed the room and took her hands. They were ice cold. We have the evidence, the photos, the paperwork, the other business owners who came forward. None of that goes away because of one hit piece. But people will believe it, some of them, at least. And even if we prove them wrong, the doubt will always be there. Then we fight harder. How? I've been fighting for 5 years, Caleb. I'm tired. I'm so tired of fighting. He pulled her into his arms, and she collapsed against him, her body shaking with sobs she'd been holding back for too long. He held her while she cried, stroking her hair, murmuring words that were less about meaning than about comfort. We're going to get through this, he said. I promise. You can't promise that. I can promise that I won't leave, that I'll be here, beside you, no matter what they throw at us. She pulled back, wiping her eyes, and looked at him with something like wonder. You barely know me. I know enough. You know I'm a mess, that my life is a disaster, that being connected to me is going to drag you down. I know you're brave, that you fight for what matters even when the odds are against you, that you see people, really see them, in a way that most people don't. He cupped her face in his hands. I know that my daughter adores you, that you make better coffee than anyone I've ever met, that when I'm with you, I feel like the person I'm supposed to be. Fresh tears spilled down Lena's cheeks. Caleb, I'm not going anywhere, Lena. They can write whatever they want. They can make up whatever stories they need to make themselves feel better. But at the end of the day, we know the truth, and the truth doesn't change because some anonymous source told a reporter what Whitmore Properties paid them to say. She laughed, wet and broken. When did you become the optimistic one? Around the same time you became the one who needed rescuing. We're taking turns. And the cafe door rattled. Someone trying to get in. A reporter's voice called through the glass. Ms. Parker, do you have any comment on the allegations? Caleb glared at the door. Do you want me to make them leave? How? I don't know. I'll think of something creative. Lena actually smiled at that. Tempting, but no. We need to handle this the right way. What's the right way? I have no idea. But I know someone who might. She pulled out her phone and dialed. After a moment, someone answered. Elena, it's Lena Parker. I need help. Caleb didn't know who Elena was, but the name triggered something. A memory of a conversation they'd had weeks ago about Lena's college roommate who'd gone on to become some kind of lawyer. Lena talked for several minutes, explaining the situation, the hit piece, the call from Whitmore Properties. When she hung up, some of the despair had lifted from her face. Elena's catching the first flight out. She specializes in defamation and corporate malfeasance. She says if Whitmore Properties is behind this article, she'll find the evidence. How? She has resources, connections. She's worked on cases like this before, corporations using media manipulation to silence critics. She says the key is proving malicious intent. Caleb nodded slowly. So we fight. So we fight. Outside, the crowd of reporters was growing. Caleb could hear more voices, more questions, more cameras clicking. The story was spreading, and with it, the poison that Whitmore Properties had planted. But for the first time since he'd seen the headline, Caleb felt something like hope. They weren't alone. They had evidence. They had allies. And they had each other. That would have to be enough. The next 3 days were chaos. Elena arrived on Sunday evening. A small woman with sharp eyes and sharper heels who walked into the cafe like she owned it and immediately took over Lena's kitchen as a war room. By Monday morning, she had assembled a team of assistants and was poring over every piece of evidence they had. The good news, Elena said over coffee that Lena had brewed at her direction, is that this article is sloppy. Anonymous sources, vague accusations, no actual facts. It's designed to damage, not to inform. And the bad news? Lena asked. The bad news is that it's working. I've been monitoring social media since I got here. The narrative is shifting. People who supported you last week are now asking questions. Caleb, who had been silent during most of the briefing, finally spoke. How do we shift it back? Elena turned her sharp eyes on him. You go on the offensive. Stop playing defense. Stop reacting to what they say, and start controlling the story yourselves. How? A press conference. Today. You stand in front of those cameras, tell your story, show your evidence, and let the world see who you really are. Lena paled. I can't. I'm not good at that kind of thing. Public speaking, cameras. Then let me do the talking, Caleb said. Both women looked at him. They dragged my name into this too, he continued. They said I was paid off, that I was desperate and willing to do anything for money. If we're going on the offensive, we go together. Elena's expression shifted, something like approval flickering in her eyes. That could work. The wrongly accused working man defending the family business. It's a good narrative. It's not a narrative. It's the truth. In this business, truth and narrative are the same thing. What matters is how you tell it. They spent the rest of the morning preparing, rehearsing talking points, reviewing evidence, anticipating questions. Elena was relentless, drilling them on every possible angle of attack until Caleb's head was spinning. At noon, they gathered on the patio of Magnolia Grounds. The press was already there, a wall of cameras and microphones and faces hungry for headlines. Caleb stood beside Lena, their shoulders touching, united against the storm. Elena stepped forward first, her voice carrying effortlessly across the crowd. Thank you all for coming. My name is Elena Vasquez, and I'm representing Lena Parker in this matter. I have a brief statement, and then Ms. Parker and Mr. Reed will answer a limited number of questions. She outlined the facts with clinical precision, the sabotage they'd discovered, the evidence they'd gathered, the pattern of corruption that had plagued the district for 15 years. She named Gerald Hartley and his connection to Whitmore Properties. She quoted the business owners who had come forward with similar stories, and then she produced a document that made the reporters lean forward in their seats. This is a signed affidavit from the contractor who performed the unauthorized plumbing work at Magnolia Grounds. He states, under penalty of perjury, that he was directed by Gerald Hartley to redirect the drainage line in a manner that would cause structural damage to the building. The crowd erupted. Questions flew. Cameras flashed. Elena held up her hand. The contractor came forward of his own volition after seeing yesterday's article. He has agreed to cooperate fully with the ongoing investigation in exchange for immunity on the unauthorized work charges. She stepped back, and Lena stepped forward. Caleb watched her transform. The nervous woman who had trembled at the thought of public speaking was gone. In her place stood someone calm, controlled, and utterly certain. I didn't stage anything, Lena said, her voice clear and steady. I didn't hire anyone to fake evidence. I didn't frame Gerald Hartley. What I did was refuse to sell my mother's cafe to people who thought they could take it from me through intimidation and sabotage. She paused, letting the words land. Whitmore Properties wants you to believe I'm a liar because the truth is inconvenient for them. The truth is that a city inspector, working with his brother's development company, systematically destroyed businesses in this district to force them to sell. The truth is that when I wouldn't play along, they tried to destroy me too. And when that didn't work, they tried to destroy my reputation. Lena looked directly into the nearest camera. I'm not going anywhere. Magnolia Grounds isn't going anywhere. And if Whitmore Properties thinks one hit piece is going to make me give up, they don't know me very well. The questions came fast after that. About the investigation, about the contractor's testimony, about what Lena planned to do next. She fielded them with a grace that surprised even Caleb, who had thought he knew her. When it was his turn, he kept it simple. I'm a carpenter. I fix things that are broken. When I saw what someone had done to Lena's cafe, I fixed it. That's not a conspiracy. That's just my job. A reporter near the front called out, Mr. Reed, the article suggested you were paid for your involvement. Can you comment on that? I was paid in free coffee, Caleb said, which, for the record, is some of the best coffee in the city. Laughter rippled through the crowd. Even Elena smiled. My financial situation is my business, he continued, his voice growing serious. But I'll tell you this. I'm a single father with a 7-year-old daughter who asks hard questions. She asked me why I don't have any friends. She asked me why I never do anything except work. And one day, I walked into this cafe and met a woman who needed help. So I helped. Because that's what you do when you see someone fighting alone against something they shouldn't have to face by themselves. He looked at Lena, then back at the cameras. If that makes me suspicious, then I guess I'm suspicious. But I'd rather be that than the kind of man who watches someone drown and doesn't throw them a rope. The press conference ended shortly after. Elena shepherded them back inside while her assistants fielded follow-up questions, and for the first time in days, the cafe felt quiet. Lena collapsed into a chair, her composure finally cracking. I can't believe I did that. You were incredible, Elena said. Both of you. This is going to shift things. You think? I know. The contractor's testimony changes everything. Whitmore Properties didn't count on their own man turning on them. Caleb sat down across from Lena, exhaustion settling into his bones. What happens now? Now we wait. The investigation will accelerate with this new evidence. I've already reached out to some contacts at the state level, people who've been waiting for something like this to take down the Hartley brothers. And the article? Will be yesterday's news by tonight, trust me. Elena excused herself to make calls, and Caleb and Lena were left alone in the dim cafe. Outside, the reporters were dispersing, the story evolving, the narrative shifting. Thank you, Lena said quietly. For what? For standing up there with me. For saying what you said. Caleb reached across the table and took her hand. I meant every word. I know, that's what makes it matter. They sat in silence for a while, the weight of the day settling around them. Then Lena's phone buzzed, a text from someone named Maria. Oh no. What? I forgot. The catering order for the Martinez wedding tomorrow. I was supposed to confirm it this morning. Caleb watched as the familiar tension crept back into her shoulders, the endless to-do list reasserting its hold. Go, he said. Handle it. I'll close up here. You don't have to. I know, but I want to. Lena hesitated, then leaned across the table and kissed him, brief, warm, full of promise. Thank you, she said again. You keep saying that. Because I keep meaning it. She grabbed her phone and disappeared into the kitchen, and Caleb sat alone in the quiet cafe watching the light fade through the windows. His phone buzzed. A text from Mrs. Chen. Lily wants to know if you're coming to get her tonight or if she should plan to live with us forever. Caleb smiled and typed back. On my way. Tell her I'm bringing pizza. He stood up, stretched, and looked around the cafe one last time. This place had changed his life in ways he was still trying to understand. A month ago, he'd been a man going through the motions, working, parenting, surviving. Now he was fighting for something, fighting with someone. The bell above the door jingled as he stepped outside, and he nearly collided with a man standing on the threshold. The man was tall, well-dressed, with the kind of expensive haircut that screamed money. His smile was polished and practiced, the smile of someone who was used to getting what he wanted. Mr. Reed, the man said, I was hoping to catch you. Caleb's instincts flared. Do I know you? We haven't met, but I think it's time we did. The man extended his hand. Robert Hartley, I believe you've been making my life very difficult lately. Caleb stared at the hand, making no move to take it. Robert Hartley, Gerald's brother, CEO of Whitmore Properties, the man behind everything that had tried to destroy Lena and her cafe. I don't think we have anything to talk about, Caleb said. Oh, I think we do. Hartley's smile didn't waver. In fact, I think we have quite a lot to discuss. Shall we take a walk? Caleb looked at the man who had caused so much pain, who had orchestrated so much destruction, who was standing here now with the casual confidence of someone who believed he could still win, and he made a decision. After you, Caleb said. They walked. The evening air had turned cool, carrying the scent of magnolias and distant rain. Caleb walked beside Robert Hartley, every muscle in his body coiled with tension, his carpenter's hands clenched at his sides. They moved away from the cafe, past the wrought iron fence, past the tables where he'd shared coffee and conversation with Lena, past everything that mattered. Robert Hartley walked like a man who owned the sidewalk beneath his feet, measured, confident, unhurried. His Italian loafers clicked against the concrete with a rhythm that grated against Caleb's nerves. Beautiful evening, Hartley said, as if they were old friends taking a pleasant stroll. I've always loved this neighborhood. There's something authentic about it. Character. History. Is that why you're trying to destroy it? Hartley chuckled, a polished sound that held no warmth. Destroy is such a strong word. I prefer transform. Progress requires change, Mr. Reed. Surely you understand that. But I understand that you've been systematically sabotaging businesses to force them to sell. I understand that your brother used his position to intimidate and threaten anyone who stood in your way. Allegations. Unproven allegations. Hartley stopped at a bench overlooking a small park, its trees casting long shadows in the fading light. He sat down, crossing his legs, every movement practiced and deliberate. Please, sit. We're not enemies here. We're not friends either. No. But we could be allies. Hartley patted the bench beside him. Sit. Hear me out. Then you can go back to playing hero if you want. Against his better judgment, Caleb sat. Not because he trusted Hartley, he didn't, but because he wanted to understand what he was dealing with. Know your enemy, his father had always said. Know what they want, and you'll know how to stop them. The press conference was impressive, Hartley continued. You and Ms. Parker make quite a team. The wrongly accused working man defending the struggling business owner. Very compelling narrative. It's not a narrative. It's the truth. Truth. Hartley smiled, the word seeming to amuse him. Truth is whatever people believe, Mr. Reed, and right now, people believe you're heroes. That's fine. Enjoy it. But beliefs change. Stories evolve. And the truth you're so proud of has a limited shelf life. Is that a threat? It's an observation. Today's heroes are tomorrow's footnotes. The investigation will drag on for months, maybe years. The legal fees will pile up. The public will lose interest and move on to the next scandal. And when the dust settles, do you know what will still be standing? Caleb didn't answer. Whitmore Properties. Hartley spread his hands as if presenting a gift. We have resources, patience, and lawyers who bill by the hour. We don't need to win today. We just need to outlast. And you think I'm going to help you? Hartley reached into his jacket and pulled out an envelope, setting it on the bench between them. I think you're a practical man, single father, working carpenter. You've been struggling financially since your wife died. Don't look so surprised. I do my homework. You've remortgaged your house twice, you're behind on your daughter's school payments, and you haven't taken a vacation in 5 years. My finances are none of your business. They're about to be. Hartley tapped the envelope. Inside is a check for $200,000. Clean money, legitimate consulting fee. All I need is for you to step back. Stop helping Ms. Parker. Let the story die. Caleb stared at the envelope like it was a poisonous snake. I'm not asking you to lie, Hartley continued. I'm not asking you to hurt anyone. I'm just asking you to walk away, focus on your daughter, fix other people's patios, live your life. And what happens to Lena? Ms. Parker will receive a fair offer for her property. More than fair, actually. She'll be able to start fresh somewhere else, without the burden of a failing cafe and a neighborhood that's changing whether she likes it or not. She doesn't want to sell. She will. Eventually. When she realizes that fighting us costs more than it's worth. Hartley leaned back, his expression almost sympathetic. I'm offering you an off-ramp, Mr. Reed, a way out that benefits everyone. Take the money. Disappear from this story. Let nature take its course. Caleb picked up the envelope. It was heavier than he expected, or maybe that was his imagination. $200,000. Enough to pay off his mortgage, catch up on Lily's school, put money away for college, enough to breathe for the first time in years. All he had to do was abandon the woman he was falling in love with. He thought about Lena's face when she told him about her mother, about the promise she'd made to keep the cafe alive. He thought about the other business owners who had lost everything because they didn't have someone willing to fight for them. He thought about Lily, asking hard questions about why he never had friends, why he never did anything except work. He thought about the man he wanted to be. Caleb stood up, turned to face Robert Hartley, and tore the envelope in half. The pieces fluttered to the ground like wounded birds, scattering across the sidewalk. Hartley's mask slipped for just a moment, surprise flickering across his polished features before the professional smile returned. That was dramatic and expensive. I don't want your money. Everyone wants money, Mr. Reed. You just haven't admitted it yet. Then you don't know me as well as you think. Caleb stepped closer, close enough to see the slight twitch in Hartley's jaw, the tension beneath the smooth exterior. I've spent my whole life building things, houses, decks, furniture, things that last, things that matter. You spend your life tearing things down, taking what other people built and turning it into condos for people who don't give a damn about this neighborhood or the people in it. Progress. You call it progress. I call it destruction with better marketing. Caleb's voice had gone quiet, dangerous, the voice of a man who had reached the end of his patience. You want to know why I'm helping Lena? It's not for money. It's not for glory. It's because she's the only person on this block who had the guts to tell you no. And I will stand beside her every single day until you give up or burn out, because that's what decent people do. Hartley's expression hardened, the polished facade cracking to reveal something colder underneath. You're making a mistake. Maybe, but it's my mistake to make. You have a daughter, a 7-year-old girl who depends on you. Caleb went very still. What did you just say? Lily, that's her name, isn't it? Sweet kid. Goes to Riverside Elementary. Takes the bus home on Tuesdays and Thursdays when you're working late. The words hit Caleb like a fist to the chest. He grabbed Hartley by the lapels of his expensive suit and hauled him to his feet, their faces inches apart. If you go anywhere near my daughter, relax. Hartley's voice was calm, almost bored. I'm not threatening your child. I'm merely pointing out that you have vulnerabilities. Everyone does. And when this is over, however long it takes, those vulnerabilities will still be there. Caleb's grip tightened, every instinct screaming at him to do something, anything, to make this man understand that some lines should never be crossed. But he wasn't that person. He wasn't the kind of man who solved problems with violence. And letting Hartley goad him into something he'd regret was exactly what the other man wanted. He released Hartley with a shove that sent the developer stumbling back against the bench. Stay away from me. Stay away from Lena. And stay the hell away from my daughter. Or what? Caleb didn't answer. He turned and walked away, his heart pounding, his hands shaking with suppressed rage. Behind him, Hartley called out one final taunt. You can't protect everyone, Mr. Reed. Sooner or later, you'll have to choose. Caleb kept walking. He made it 3 blocks before his legs gave out. He collapsed onto a bus stop bench, his head in his hands, trying to breathe through the panic clawing at his chest. Hartley had mentioned Lily. He'd known her name, her school, her schedule. That wasn't a coincidence. That was a message. Caleb pulled out his phone and called Mrs. Chen. Mr. Reed, is everything okay? Is Lily with you? Yes, she's right here. We're playing board games. Why? What's wrong? Nothing. Nothing's wrong. He swallowed hard. I'll be there in 20 minutes. Don't let her out of your sight. Caleb, you're scaring me. I'm sorry. I'll explain when I get there. He hung up and sat for a moment longer, trying to collect himself. Then he stood, squared his shoulders, and walked to his truck. The drive to Mrs. Chen's house felt endless, every red light an eternity, every second away from Lily a wound that wouldn't stop bleeding. When he finally pulled into the driveway, he was out of the truck before the engine had fully stopped. Lily met him at the door, her face lighting up with that pure joy that never failed to break his heart. Daddy, Mrs. Chen said you sounded weird on the phone. Are you sick? Caleb swept her into his arms and held her tight, breathing in the smell of her shampoo, feeling her small heart beating against his chest. I'm not sick, Bug. I just missed you. You saw me this morning. I know, but I missed you anyway. Lily squirmed in his grip. You're squishing me. He loosened his hold but didn't let go. Sorry, I just needed a hug. You need a lot of hugs lately. She pulled back and studied his face with those sharp eyes that saw too much. Is it because of Lena? What do you mean? Mrs. Chen says you're in love. She says that's why you've been acting weird. Caleb shot a glance at Mrs. Chen, who was standing in the doorway with an expression that was part apology, part amusement. I may have mentioned something, Mrs. Chen admitted. Mrs. Chen talks a lot, Lily added helpfully. But I don't mind. I like Lena. She makes good cookies. Caleb closed his eyes, overwhelmed by the simple, beautiful normalcy of his daughter's world. She didn't know about Robert Hartley. She didn't know about threats and bribes and powerful men who thought they could take whatever they wanted. She just knew about cookies and board games and whether her dad was acting weird. He wanted to keep it that way. He had to keep it that way. "Let's go home, Bug," he said. "I promised you pizza, remember?" "You're not going to get Lena?" "Not tonight. Tonight it's just us." Lily considered this, then nodded. "Okay, but tomorrow you should bring her flowers. Mrs. Chen says women like flowers." "Mrs. Chen seems to have a lot of opinions." "She's very wise," Mrs. Chen said serenely. "It comes with age." Caleb thanked her, loaded Lily into the truck, and drove home. The pizza arrived 30 minutes later, and they ate it on the couch while watching a movie about a princess who saved her kingdom with a magic sword. Lily fell asleep halfway through, her head on his shoulder, her small body warm and trusting. Caleb sat in the dark for a long time after the credits rolled, watching his daughter sleep, thinking about Robert Hartley's words. "You can't protect everyone. Sooner or later, you'll have to choose." But that was where Hartley was wrong. Caleb didn't have to choose between Lily and Lena. He just had to be smart, careful, prepared. He pulled out his phone and sent a text to Elena. "We need to talk. Hartley approached me tonight, made threats, need to discuss security." The response came immediately. "My hotel, 7 a.m., bring coffee." Caleb smiled despite himself. At least Elena had her priorities straight. He carried Lily to bed, tucked her in with her stuffed elephant, and stood in the doorway for a long moment, watching her sleep. Tomorrow, he would fight. Tomorrow, he would plan. Tomorrow, he would figure out how to protect everyone he loved from a man who thought he could buy and bully his way to victory. But tonight, he would rest, because the battle was just beginning. Elena's hotel room had been transformed into a command center. Papers covered every surface, laptops hummed on makeshift desks, and a whiteboard dominated one wall, covered in names and arrows and connections that looked like a conspiracy theorist's fever dream. Caleb handed Elena a large coffee and surveyed the chaos. "You've been busy." "Sleep is for people who aren't trying to take down a corporate crime syndicate." Elena took the coffee without looking up from her laptop. "Sit. Tell me everything." Caleb told her about Hartley's approach, the bribe, the veiled threats about Lily. Elena listened without interrupting, her expression growing darker with every word. "He mentioned your daughter by name?" "Name, school, schedule. He wanted me to know he'd done his homework." Elena set down her coffee, her jaw tight. "That's crossing a line. A big one." "I know." "Did anyone else witness this conversation?" "No, it was just the two of us." "Damn, that makes it harder to prove, but not impossible." She stood and walked to the whiteboard, adding a note in red marker. "Robert Hartley has been very careful up until now. Everything through intermediaries, everything deniable. But threatening a child, even implicitly, that's desperation. That means we're getting to him. Or it means he's getting ready to do something drastic." Elena turned to face him. "Either way, we need to escalate. I've been in contact with the State Attorney General's office. They're very interested in what we've found, not just the sabotage, but the pattern of corruption across the whole district. This isn't just about Lena's cafe anymore. It's about every business owner who was intimidated, every inspector who looked the other way, every official who might have taken money to stay quiet." "That sounds like a long investigation." "It will be. But Caleb," she paused, choosing her words carefully, "this is bigger than you realize. The connections we've found go all the way to City Hall, council members, zoning officials, people with real power. Whitmore Properties didn't build their empire through smart investing. They built it through systematic corruption, and Gerald Hartley was just the tip of the iceberg." Caleb absorbed this, feeling the weight of it settle on his shoulders. He'd started this to help a woman save her cafe. Now he was caught up in something that could bring down half the city government. "What do you need from me?" "Your testimony, your evidence, your willingness to stand in front of a grand jury and tell them exactly what you told me." "And Lily?" Elena's expression softened. "I have a friend who specializes in personal security, ex-FBI, very discreet. I'll have her reach out to you today. Until this is over, you and your daughter should have someone watching your back." "I can't afford—" "You won't have to. Consider it part of my fee." She held up a hand to forestall his objection. "I'm doing this pro bono, Caleb. Not because I'm generous, but because I hate men like Robert Hartley. They think their money makes them untouchable. I've made it my life's work to prove them wrong." There was something fierce in Elena's eyes, something personal. Caleb didn't ask what it was. Everyone had their reasons. "Thank you," he said. "Don't thank me yet. This is going to get worse before it gets better." She returned to her laptop. "Now, I need you to go to Magnolia Grounds and brief Lena on what happened. She needs to know about Hartley's approach." "She's not going to take it well." "No, but she's tougher than she looks, and she deserves to know what we're up against." Caleb nodded, finished his coffee, and headed for the door. He paused with his hand on the handle. "Elena?" "Yes?" "Why are you really doing this? And don't say it's because you hate men like Hartley." Elena was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, "My father owned a grocery store in the Bronx. He ran it for 30 years, woke up at 4 a.m. every day, worked until after dark, never took a vacation. When I was 15, a development company decided they wanted his block. They used every trick in the book: code violations, zoning changes, mysterious fires. My father held on for 2 years before his heart gave out. I'm sorry. He died still fighting. Never got to see me graduate law school, never got to see me start my practice, but he taught me that some things are worth fighting for, even when you can't win." She looked at Caleb with eyes that held both grief and steel. "Lena's Cafe isn't just a building, it's a legacy. And I'll be damned if I let another family lose theirs the way I lost mine." Caleb nodded slowly. "I understand. I know you do. That's why I trust you." She turned back to her laptop. "Now go. Lena's waiting." Caleb found Lena in the kitchen of Magnolia Grounds, elbow deep in dough, flour dusting her hair and her apron and every surface within a 3-foot radius. She looked up when he entered, her smile bright and genuine, and something in his chest ached at the thought of what he had to tell her. "You're early," she said. "I wasn't expecting you until noon. We need to talk." The smile faded. "That's never a good opening. What happened?" Caleb pulled up a stool and told her everything: the walk with Hartley, the bribe, the threats, the way he'd torn up the envelope and watched $200,000 scatter across the sidewalk. He told her about Elena's revelations, about the scope of the investigation, about the security measures they'd need to take. Lena listened in silence, her hands still buried in dough, her expression unreadable. When he finished, she said, "He mentioned Lily by name. And you turned down $200,000. It wasn't a hard choice." Lena pulled her hands from the dough, wiped them on her apron, and walked around the counter to stand in front of him. Her eyes were bright with something he couldn't quite identify. Anger, gratitude, fear, love, all of it tangled together. "Caleb Reed," she said softly, "you're either the bravest man I've ever met or the dumbest." "Probably both." She laughed, but there were tears in it. "What are we going to do?" "We're going to fight. Same as we have been. Elena thinks we can take them down, really take them down. Not just Hartley, but the whole network. It's going to be hard and ugly, and it might take years, but we can do it. And in the meantime, we live our lives. We run your cafe. We raise my daughter. We don't let them make us small." Lena reached out and touched his face, her fingers leaving traces of flour on his cheek. "You make it sound so simple." "It is simple. It's just not easy." She kissed him then, soft and slow and full of everything they hadn't said. When she pulled back, her eyes were clear. "Okay, let's fight." "Yeah?" "Yeah." She smiled, and there was steel in it. "But first, I need to finish these scones. The breakfast rush starts in an hour, and if I don't have fresh pastries, Mrs. Goldstein will complain for a week." Caleb laughed, the tension finally breaking. "Can I help? Do you know how to knead dough?" "I'm a carpenter. I've got strong hands." "Then wash up and get over here. We've got work to do." They worked side by side in the kitchen, Caleb following Lena's instructions as she guided him through the mysteries of pastry making. It was simple work, repetitive work, the kind of work that left your hands busy and your mind free to wander. And as the scones took shape and the cafe began to fill with the sounds of the morning, the espresso machine hissing, customers chatting, silverware clinking, Caleb felt something settle in his chest. This was what he was fighting for. Not just the building, not just the business, but the life inside it. The community. The ordinary magic of people gathering over coffee and pastries to share their days. Robert Hartley could offer him all the money in the world, and it wouldn't be worth a fraction of this. The breakfast rush came and went. Caleb helped where he could, clearing tables, washing dishes, even manning the register when the regular cashier went on break. The regulars recognized him now, nodding hello, making small talk about the weather and the investigation and whether the scones were better than usual. Around 10 o'clock, the door opened and a woman walked in who didn't fit the usual customer profile. She was tall, athletic, with close-cropped gray hair and the kind of watchful eyes that missed nothing. She scanned the room with practiced efficiency, then made her way to the counter. "Lena Parker?" Lena looked up from the espresso machine. "That's me." "I'm Grace Chen. Elena Vasquez sent me." The woman extended her hand. "I understand you might need some security consultation." Caleb stepped forward. "You're the ex-FBI agent?" "Retired, but the skills don't expire." Grace's eyes shifted to him, assessing. "You must be Caleb Reed. Elena told me what happened last night. We should talk." They retreated to Lena's office, a cramped space behind the kitchen that served as storage, filing cabinet, and occasional refuge from difficult customers. Grace settled into the only chair, her posture relaxed but alert, like a cat pretending to sleep. "Tell me about the threat," she said. "Word for word, if you can remember." Caleb repeated the conversation, and Grace listened with the focused intensity of someone who was cataloging every detail. "He didn't make an explicit threat against your daughter," she said when he finished. "He was careful about that. But the implication was clear." "What does that mean for us?" "It means he's smart. He knows how to intimidate without crossing the line into something prosecutable." Grace pulled out a small notebook and began writing. "Here's what I recommend. First, we change your daughter's routine. Different pickup times, different routes to school. Nothing predictable. She takes the bus. Not anymore. You drive her, or I drive her, or we find a trusted alternate. The bus is too exposed." Caleb's stomach tightened, but he nodded. "Second, we install security at your home and at the cafe. Cameras, motion sensors, the works. Nothing visible. We don't want Hartley to know we're watching, but comprehensive enough that if anyone approaches, we'll know." "I can't afford—" "Elena's covering it. Don't argue." Grace's tone brooked no disagreement. "Third, and this is the most important, you both need to be aware of your surroundings at all times. Anyone following you, anyone watching you, anyone who seems out of place, you see something, you tell me immediately." "You think Hartley would actually do something?" "I think men like Hartley don't make empty threats. He wanted to scare you into backing down. When that didn't work, he'll try something else. Our job is to make sure that something else doesn't succeed." Grace spent the next hour walking them through protocols, giving them emergency contact numbers, explaining what to do in various scenarios. It was sobering, clinical, and deeply unsettling, the kind of conversation that belonged in a spy movie, not in the back office of a neighborhood cafe. When she finally left, Lena sank into the chair Grace had vacated, her face pale. "This is really happening," she said. "This is my life now. Security consultants and emergency protocols and changing my routine because a powerful man doesn't like that I said no." Caleb knelt in front of her, taking her hands. "It's temporary. Once the investigation is over, is it though? Even if we win, even if Hartley goes to prison, there will always be someone else. Someone bigger, someone meaner, someone who looks at what I have and decides they want it. Then we'll fight them too. We can't fight forever, Caleb. We don't have to. We just have to fight until they realize we won't break, until they understand that taking us on costs more than leaving us alone." Lena looked at him, her whiskey eyes searching his face for something, certainty, maybe, or doubt. Whatever she found seemed to satisfy her. "You really believe that?" "I do." "Why?" Caleb thought about the question. He thought about his father, who had taught him to build things that lasted. About Sarah, who had loved fiercely and completely until the day she couldn't love anymore. About Lily, who asked hard questions and deserved honest answers. "Because I've seen what happens when people give up," he said. "My wife gave up on life before she died. Not because she wanted to, but because the cancer took everything from her and she didn't have the strength to fight anymore. I watched her disappear piece by piece until there was nothing left. His voice caught, and he had to pause before continuing. After she died, I almost gave up too. I went through the motions, work, parenting, survival, but I wasn't really living. I was just existing, waiting for something to change without being willing to change it myself. What changed? You. The word came out before he could stop it, raw and honest. Meeting you, helping you, fighting beside you. It reminded me what it feels like to care about something, to want something, to believe that the future can be better than the past. Tears were streaming down Lena's face now, silent and steady. Caleb, I'm not giving up. Not on you, not on this cafe, not on whatever we're building together. And I'm not letting Robert Hartley or anyone else take that away from us. Lena pulled him close and kissed him, fierce and desperate, tasting of salt and coffee, and something that felt like hope. Okay, she whispered against his lips. Okay, we fight. Together. Together. They held each other in the cramped office, surrounded by filing cabinets and invoices and all the ordinary detritus of a small business, and for a moment nothing else existed. Not the threats, not the investigation, not the uncertain future stretching out before them. Just two people, holding on. The weeks that followed were a blur of activity. Elena's investigation accelerated, fueled by the contractor's testimony and a growing list of business owners willing to speak on record. The state attorney general opened a formal inquiry. Local reporters who had moved on to other stories suddenly circled back, sensing something bigger brewing beneath the surface. Robert Hartley went quiet. No more approaches, no more threats. Grace reported that his movement suggested a man preparing for siege, meetings with lawyers, late nights at the office, a notable decrease in public appearances. He knows we're coming, Grace said during one of their weekly briefings. He's trying to get ahead of it. Can he? Lena asked. Depends on how deep the rot goes. If he's just protecting himself and his brother, he might be able to cut a deal. But if this goes higher, city council, maybe the mayor's office, then he's going to need a lot more than good lawyers. The cafe thrived despite the chaos, or maybe because of it. The publicity had transformed Magnolia Grounds from a neighborhood fixture into a symbol of resistance, of integrity, of ordinary people standing up against powerful interests. Customers came from across the city, tourists snapped photos, and Lena had to hire 3 new servers just to handle the demand. Caleb divided his time between the cafe and his regular carpentry work, which had also picked up. Word had spread about the man who'd exposed the corrupt inspector, and suddenly everyone wanted the honest carpenter who did things right. He had more jobs than he could handle, enough to finally clear his debts and start putting money away for Lily's future. And through it all, there was Lily herself, his anchor, his purpose, the reason he kept fighting even when the weight of it threatened to crush him. She knew something was happening, of course. She was too smart not to notice the changes in their routine. The security cameras, the woman named Grace, who sometimes drove her to school, but she didn't ask hard questions, at least not at first. She seemed to understand in the way children sometimes do that her father was handling something important and that her job was to trust him. Until one evening, when she looked up from her homework and said, "Daddy, are we in danger?" Caleb froze, his hands going still on the dinner he was preparing. He'd been dreading this conversation, rehearsing different versions of it in his head for weeks. But none of his rehearsals had prepared him for the matter-of-fact way Lily asked the question, as if danger were just another item on a checklist. "What makes you ask that, Bug?" "Grace carries a gun. I saw it when she was driving me to school." Lily's expression was serious, her eyes too old for her face. "And you check the locks 3 times before bed now. And Lena looks scared sometimes when she thinks no one's watching." Caleb set down his knife and walked over to the table, sitting across from his daughter. "You're very observant. You always said I should pay attention to things." "I did say that." He took a breath. "Lily, do you remember when we talked about the cafe? About the man who was trying to hurt Lena's business? The bad inspector." "Yes. Well, the bad inspector has a brother, a powerful man who doesn't like that we stopped him. And that man, he might try to make things difficult for us." "Difficult how?" Caleb weighed his words carefully. Lily deserved the truth, but she was still a child. His child. and there were some truths too heavy for 7-year-old shoulders. He might try to scare us, to make us give up. That's why Grace is here, and that's why we're being extra careful. But we're not going to give up. It wasn't a question. It was a statement, delivered with the absolute certainty that only children possess. No, Caleb said. We're not going to give up. Good. Lily nodded as if the matter were settled. Because Lena makes really good cookies, and Mrs. Chen says you're in love with her, and I think you should marry her so she can be my new mom. Caleb choked on nothing. Lily, I've thought about it a lot. She's nice, and she's pretty, and she doesn't talk about her ex-boyfriend like Jessica did. Lily's expression was completely serious. Those are the 3 most important qualities in a wife. Who told you that? Mrs. Chen. Of course she did. She's very wise. It comes with age. Caleb buried his face in his hands, laughing despite himself. Bug, getting married is a big decision. Lena and I have only known each other for a few months. Daddy, you've been alone forever. Lena likes you. You like her. What's complicated about it? Nothing, Caleb thought, and everything. We'll see, he said. Now finish your homework. That's what grown-ups say when they don't want to talk about something. Yes, it is. Lily sighed the sigh of a child burdened with an unreasonable parent, but she returned to her homework without further argument. Caleb went back to making dinner, his mind churning with questions he wasn't ready to answer. Marriage, a new mom for Lily, a future that extended beyond fighting and surviving. It wasn't impossible. It was just terrifying. But as he stirred the pasta and listened to Lily murmur multiplication tables under her breath, Caleb found himself wondering if maybe, just maybe, terrifying was exactly what he needed. That night, after Lily was asleep, Caleb sat on the porch and called Lena. Hey, she answered, her voice warm and tired. I was just thinking about you. Good thoughts or bad thoughts? Complicated thoughts. That sounds about right. He leaned back in his chair, looking up at the stars. Lily asked me tonight if we're in danger. Oh no, what did you tell her? A simplified version of the truth. She took it surprisingly well, and then she told me I should marry you. There was a pause, then, she said what? She's very direct, gets it from me, apparently. And what did you say? Caleb thought about how to answer. The honest answer was complicated, a tangle of fear and hope, and the memory of Sarah's face in those final days, when loving someone had meant watching them slip away. I said we'd see. Another pause, longer this time. Is that what you want? For us to see? I don't know what I want. I know that being with you feels right. I know that when I think about the future, you're in it. But Lena, I lost my wife. I lost her slowly, painfully, watching her disappear piece by piece. And the idea of loving someone like that again, of making myself vulnerable to that kind of loss, scares you, terrifies me. Lena was quiet for a moment. When she spoke, her voice was soft. My mother told me once that love is just fear with its eyes open. You see all the ways it could hurt you, all the ways it could fall apart, and you choose it anyway. Because the alternative, closing yourself off, protecting yourself from ever being hurt, that's not living. That's just existing. Your mother was smart. She was. I miss her every day. A deep breath. Caleb, I'm not asking you for promises. I'm not asking you to know exactly what you want or where this is going. I'm just asking you to stay, to be here, to keep choosing this, whatever this is, one day at a time. That I can do. Then that's enough. For now. They talked until late about nothing and everything, the cafe, the investigation, Lily's homework, the scones that hadn't risen properly that morning. It was ordinary conversation, the kind that couples have when they've moved past the fireworks and into the comfortable warmth of everyday life. When Caleb finally hung up, he sat on the porch for a long time, watching the stars wheel overhead. He thought about fear, about love, about a little girl who asked hard questions and a woman who made him feel alive. And for the first time in years, he thought about tomorrow with something that felt like anticipation instead of dread. Whatever was coming, Robert Hartley, the investigation, the uncertain future, he would face it, not alone, not anymore. The call came at 3 in the morning, shattering the silence of Caleb's bedroom like a stone through glass. He grabbed his phone from the nightstand, heart already pounding, and saw Elena's name on the screen. What happened? It's the cafe. Elena's voice was tight, controlled, the voice of someone delivering bad news. There's been a fire. Caleb was out of bed before she finished speaking, pulling on clothes, his mind racing through worst-case scenarios. How bad? I don't know yet. I'm on my way there now. Lena called me 20 minutes ago. She was at home when the alarm company contacted her. Fire department is already on scene. Is she okay? Physically, yes. Emotionally, Elena paused. Just get there, Caleb. He hung up and stood frozen for a moment, paralyzed by the weight of what he'd just heard. The cafe, Lena's mother's legacy, everything they'd been fighting to protect. Then training kicked in, the muscle memory of a single father who'd learned to function through crisis. He checked on Lily, who was still asleep, her stuffed elephant tucked under her chin. He called Mrs. Chen, who answered on the second ring despite the hour, her voice alert and concerned. Go, she said before he could finish explaining. I'll be there in 10 minutes. Caleb kissed his daughter's forehead, left a note on the kitchen counter in case she woke before Mrs. Chen arrived, and drove through empty streets toward the orange glow that was already visible against the night sky. The scene at Magnolia Grounds was chaos. Fire trucks blocked the street, their lights painting the buildings red and blue. Firefighters moved with practiced efficiency, dragging hoses, shouting commands, battling flames that leapt from the cafe's windows like desperate animals trying to escape. A crowd had gathered on the sidewalk, neighbors in bathrobes, curious strangers, people drawn by the spectacle of destruction. And in the middle of it all, standing alone at the edge of the police tape, was Lena. She was wearing pajamas and a coat, her hair loose around her shoulders, her face illuminated by the flickering light. She wasn't crying. She wasn't screaming. She was just standing there, watching her mother's dream burn. Caleb pushed through the crowd and ducked under the tape, ignoring the officer who tried to stop him. He reached Lena and pulled her into his arms, and she collapsed against him like a building whose foundation had finally given way. I can't, she whispered. I can't watch this. Then don't. He turned her away from the fire, blocking her view with his body. I'm here. I've got you. It's gone. Everything's gone. We don't know that yet. Look at it, Caleb. Just look. He looked. The flames were concentrated on one side of the building, the side where the kitchen was, where Lena had taught him to knead dough, where they'd shared quiet conversations over coffee and planning. The patio he'd spent weeks repairing was untouched, the tables and chairs standing like silent witnesses to the destruction. But the building itself, the building was wounded. Windows shattered, smoke billowing, the old wooden structure groaning under the assault. The fire department got here fast, Caleb said, grasping for hope. They might be able to save most of it. And if they can't, then we rebuild. Lena pulled back, her eyes red-rimmed and fierce. With what? My insurance was canceled after the Hartley scandal. I've been fighting to get reinstated, but the paperwork hasn't gone through yet. If this building is destroyed, I have nothing. Caleb felt the words like a physical blow. No insurance, no safety net. Just a woman standing in pajamas watching everything she'd worked for go up in flames. Hartley, he said. This was Hartley. We don't know that. Yes, we do. This isn't a coincidence. The timing, the target, this is retaliation. Elena appeared at his side, her face grim. The fire chief says it started in the kitchen. They're treating it as suspicious. There's evidence of an accelerant. Arson. Probably. They'll need to investigate, but... She glanced at Lena, then back at Caleb. This has Whitmore Properties written all over it. Lena laughed, a harsh, broken sound. So what? Even if we prove it was them, and even if we connect it to Hartley, my cafe is still burning. My mother's cafe, the place where I grew up, where I learned to make coffee, where I promised her I would keep the dream alive. She sank onto the curb, her head in her hands, and Caleb sat beside her. He didn't have words. There were no words for this, for watching someone's world collapse while you stood helpless on the sidelines. So he just sat and waited, and held her hand while the firefighters fought a battle they were slowly, painfully winning. By dawn, the flames were out. The cafe stood, barely. The kitchen was gutted, a blackened shell of twisted metal and charred wood. The main dining room had suffered smoke and water damage, the windows blown out, the furniture ruined. But the structure itself had survived. The walls still stood. The roof, though damaged, hadn't collapsed. And the patio, Caleb's patio, the one he'd rebuilt board by board, was completely untouched. The fire chief approached them as the sun rose, his face streaked with soot, his expression weary. "Miss Parker, I'm Chief Morrison. We've done what we can for now. The building is stable, but you won't be able to enter until the investigation is complete." "How long?" "A few days, at least. We need to document everything, collect evidence, determine the cause." He paused. "Off the record? This was deliberate. Someone wanted this place to burn." Lena closed her eyes. "I know. Do you have any idea who might want to hurt you?" Caleb and Elena exchanged glances. "We have some theories," Elena said. "We'll share everything with your investigators." The chief nodded and moved away, and Lena stood on shaky legs, staring at what remained of her life's work. "I need to see it," she said. "Lena," they said, "I need to see it." She walked toward the building before anyone could stop her, and Caleb followed, staying close enough to catch her if she fell. They stopped at the edge of the patio, looking through the shattered windows into the damaged interior. It was worse up close. The smoke damage had turned everything gray, coating the walls and floor and what was left of the furniture in a layer of ash. The espresso machine, the one Lena's mother had bought when she first opened the cafe, the one that had been carefully maintained for 40 years, was a melted ruin. "She used to let me stand on a stool and watch her make coffee," Lena said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I was maybe 4 or 5. She'd explain every step, the grind, the tamp, the extraction. She said making coffee was like making love. You had to be patient, you had to pay attention, you had to care about every detail." Tears were streaming down her face now, but her voice stayed steady. When she got sick, she couldn't work anymore. But she'd still come downstairs every morning and sit at the counter just to smell the coffee brewing. She said it reminded her of being alive. Lena's hand pressed against the window frame, against the wood that was still warm from the fire. This was her. Every inch of this place was her. And now? Now we rebuild. Lena turned to look at him, her expression hollow. "You keep saying that, like it's simple." "It's not simple, but it's possible." "With what, Caleb?" "I told you, no insurance. The investigation will take months. Even if we prove Hartley did this, I'll be bankrupt before I ever see a penny in damages." "Then we find another way." "There is no other way." Caleb took her hands, forcing her to meet his eyes. "Listen to me. I know you're scared. I know this feels like the end. But Lena, you're still standing. The building is still standing. We have evidence, we have allies. We have a story that the whole city is watching. This isn't over." "It feels over." "It felt over when Hartley was sabotaging your patio. It felt over when his brother tried to bribe me. It felt over a dozen times, and every time we found a way through." He squeezed her hands. "I'm not giving up on you. I'm not giving up on this place. And I need you to not give up either." Lena was quiet for a long moment, her whiskey eyes searching his face. Then, slowly, something shifted in her expression. The despair was still there, but beneath it was something else, a flicker of the steel he'd seen the day of the press conference. "You really think we can do this?" "I think we don't have a choice. We either fight or we disappear. And I didn't fall in love with a woman who disappears." The words hung in the air between them, heavier than he'd intended. He hadn't meant to say it, hadn't planned to make this declaration of love in front of a burned-out building at 6 in the morning, but there it was. The truth, raw and unvarnished. Lena's eyes widened. "You love me?" "I love you." "You're telling me this now, while I'm standing in pajamas covered in soot, watching my cafe smolder?" "I'm telling you this now because you need to know, because I need you to understand that whatever happens next, you're not facing it alone. Because..." He stopped, running a hand through his hair. Because my 7-year-old daughter told me I should marry you, and she's usually right about things. Lena laughed, a real laugh, surprising and sudden. Lily told you to marry me? She's very direct. Gets it from me, apparently. And what did you say? I said we'd see. Caleb smiled, despite everything. But I'm starting to think she might be onto something. Lena stepped forward and kissed him, soft and fierce and tasting of smoke and tears. When she pulled back, her eyes were brighter than they'd been since he arrived. Ask me again later, she said, when I'm not covered in soot. I can do that. And Caleb? Yeah? I love you too. They stood together in front of the ruined cafe, holding hands while the sun rose over the city, and for one perfect moment, the destruction faded into the background. They were still standing. They still had each other. The rest, they would figure out. The investigation moved quickly, driven by Elena's relentless pressure and the state attorney general's growing interest in Whitmore Properties. Within 3 days, the fire investigators confirmed what everyone already knew. The blaze had been deliberately set, using an accelerant introduced through a basement window that had been forced open from the outside. The security cameras Grace had installed captured a figure approaching the building at 2:47 a.m., their face obscured by a hood, their movements quick and purposeful. The footage wasn't clear enough for identification, but it was enough to confirm intent. We're building a case, Elena said during an emergency meeting at her hotel command center. The fire is one piece, the contractor's testimony is another. The pattern of intimidation, the redirected drainage line, the failed inspections, it all adds up to a coordinated campaign of harassment and destruction. But can you prove Hartley ordered the fire? Lena asked. She looked better than she had 3 days ago, rested, determined, ready to fight. But the shadows under her eyes told the truth about how many hours she'd actually slept. Not directly. Not yet. Elena turned to Grace. What do we have on his movements that night? Robert Hartley was at a charity gala until midnight. Multiple witnesses, photos, the whole 9 yards. If he ordered this, he didn't do it in person. So he's got an alibi. A perfect alibi, which is exactly what you'd expect from someone smart enough to plan this kind of operation. Caleb had been pacing near the window, his mind turning over the problem like a carpenter examining a piece of warped wood. He didn't do it himself, and he's too smart to leave a direct paper trail, so we need to find whoever he hired. How? Lena asked. Money. Caleb turned to face them. Whatever Hartley paid for this job, it had to come from somewhere. Bank accounts, shell companies, something. If we can trace the money, we'd need access to his financial records, Elena said, which we can't get without a subpoena, and we can't get a subpoena without more evidence. Then we find another way. Caleb's jaw tightened. Hartley's operation is built on people doing his dirty work. The contractor who sabotaged the drainage line, the inspector who looked the other way, the arsonist who set the fire. Every one of those people is a potential weak link. Grace nodded slowly. You want to turn someone. I want to find someone who's already scared. Someone who realizes they're holding the bag while Hartley walks free. Someone who'd rather cooperate than go down alone. Elena and Grace exchanged glances. It's risky, Elena said. If word gets back to Hartley that we're approaching his people, he'll know we're getting close. Good. Let him sweat. Caleb's voice was hard in a way Lena had never heard before. This man threatened my daughter. He burned your building. He's been terrorizing this neighborhood for years. I'm done playing defense. The room was quiet for a moment. Then Elena smiled, small, fierce, approving. All right, let's go hunting. They started with the contractor who had testified about the drainage line, a nervous man named Davis who had been keeping a low profile since his cooperation with the investigation. Grace tracked him to a cheap apartment on the outskirts of the city, where he'd been staying since his former associates had started making threats. Caleb and Elena found him alone, jumpy, clearly not sleeping well. I already told you everything I know, Davis said, barely opening the door. I redirected the pipe like Hartley's guy told me to. I didn't ask questions. Hartley's guy, Elena pressed. Who was that? Some suit. I never got a name. But you'd recognize him if you saw him again? Davis hesitated. Maybe. I don't know. Look, I just want this to be over. I cooperated, I signed the affidavit, I did everything you asked. Why won't you leave me alone? Because it's not over, Caleb said. Someone burned down Magnolia Grounds 3 days ago. Same building you helped sabotage. You think that's a coincidence? Davis's face went pale. I had nothing to do with that. We know, but whoever did it is connected to the same people who paid you, and if we don't find them, they're going to keep destroying businesses, keep threatening families, keep getting away with everything. What do you want from me? Information, names, anything that helps us trace this back to Robert Hartley. Davis was quiet for a long moment, his hands trembling slightly. Then he stepped back and opened the door wider. Come in. There's something I should show you. Inside the cramped apartment, Davis produced a burner phone, the one his contact had given him to receive instructions. I kept it, he said. Figured it might be useful someday. Self-preservation, you know? Elena took the phone carefully, her expression sharp with interest. The texts are still here? Everything. Instructions, payment confirmations, all of it. Davis swallowed hard. I know it's not much, but maybe you can trace where the messages came from. This is more than not much. Elena was already photographing the screen. This could be exactly what we need. Caleb looked at Davis, at the fear in his eyes, the guilt, the desperate hope for redemption. He recognized that look. He'd seen it in the mirror for years after Sarah died. Why are you helping us now? He asked. You could have handed this over months ago. Davis's shoulders slumped. Because I saw the news. About the fire. About Ms. Parker standing there watching her cafe burn. He shook his head. I have a sister. She runs a bakery 2 neighborhoods over. If someone did to her what they did to that cafe, I couldn't live with myself if I didn't try to help. Then help! If the investigators need you to testify again, will you do it? Yes. Even if it's dangerous? I'm already in danger. Might as well be in danger for the right reasons. Caleb extended his hand. Davis hesitated, then shook it. Thank you, Caleb said. This matters. The burner phone proved to be exactly the break they needed. Elena's technical team traced the text messages to another burner, which had been purchased with cash at a convenience store 3 months earlier. Security footage from the store showed a man in a suit making the purchase. A man who, after hours of cross-referencing, was identified as Marcus Webb, a mid-level executive at Whitmore Properties. Webb handles special projects, Grace reported, the kind that don't show up on official records. He's been with the company for 15 years, and he's never been connected to anything illegal, at least not directly. Until now, Elena said. If we can connect Webb to the arson, we can connect Hartley to the arson. The chain of custody is there. How do we prove Webb ordered the fire? We don't have to. We just have to prove he was communicating with people involved in the sabotage campaign. The pattern establishes intent. A jury will connect the dots. The case was building, piece by piece, like a house rising from a foundation. But as the evidence accumulated, so did the danger. 3 days after they traced Webb, Grace's security system flagged an unfamiliar car parked near Caleb's house. A black sedan with tinted windows that had appeared each morning for a week and disappeared each afternoon. A surveillance team, watching, waiting. They know we're getting close, Grace said. This is Hartley trying to assess his exposure. Or planning something worse, Caleb replied. He'd moved Lily to Mrs. Chen's house temporarily, telling his daughter it was an extended sleepover while Daddy handled some work stuff. Lily had accepted the explanation with the trust of a child who believed her father could handle anything, and that trust was both a comfort and a weight on Caleb's shoulders. He couldn't fail her. He couldn't fail any of them. The confrontation came sooner than anyone expected. Caleb was at the cafe, or what remained of it, reviewing damage assessments with a structural engineer when a car pulled up to the curb. Not the black sedan. A white Mercedes, sleek and expensive. Robert Hartley stepped out. He looked different than the last time they'd met. Thinner, older, the polish wearing away to reveal something desperate underneath. His smile was still in place, but it didn't reach his eyes. Mr. Reed, Hartley said. We need to talk. Caleb set down the assessment papers. I don't think we do. Please. 5 minutes, that's all I'm asking. The engineer glanced between them nervously. Should I call someone? It's fine, Caleb said, though it wasn't. Give us a minute. He walked toward Hartley, stopping just outside arm's reach. Talk. Hartley looked at the cafe, at the boarded windows and the construction tape, at the dream that someone had tried to murder. This wasn't supposed to happen. Arson usually isn't supposed to happen. I mean, Hartley ran a hand over his face. Things got out of control. The fire, the investigation, all of it. It was supposed to be simple: pressure, negotiation, a reasonable settlement, not this. Not burning down a woman's livelihood, not threatening a 7-year-old girl, not destroying businesses and lives for profit. Hartley flinched. I never threatened your daughter. You mentioned her name, her school, her schedule. What would you call that? A warning, a negotiating tactic. I never would have... He stopped, seeming to hear himself. I never would have hurt her. Forgive me if I don't take your word for it. They stood in silence for a moment, the morning traffic passing by, the city going about its business while two men faced each other over the ruins of everything that had gone wrong. What do you want, Hartley? To make a deal. Caleb laughed, a hard, bitter sound. You came here to make a deal. After everything you've done. I came here because I'm running out of options. For the first time, Hartley's composure cracked completely, revealing the fear beneath. The investigation is closing in. My lawyers are advising me to prepare for indictment. Webb is going to flip. I can see it in his face every time we meet, and when he does, he's going to give them everything. Good. You don't understand. If I go down, I'm not going alone. There are people involved in this, powerful people, people who've been taking money from my family for years. If I'm forced to testify, I'll take them all with me. Is that supposed to make me feel sorry for you? It's supposed to make you realize that we can help each other. Hartley stepped closer, lowering his voice. I have information, names, dates, bank accounts, the whole network that's been running this district for 15 years. I can give it to you, all of it, in exchange for immunity. Caleb stared at him. You want to be a witness. I want to survive, and if that means burning down the system I helped build... He smiled, but it was a ghost of his former confidence. Well, I've always been good at adapting. Why come to me? Why not go directly to Elena or the Attorney General? Because you're the one I wronged. Hartley met his eyes. You and Miss Parker, you're the ones who refused to break, who kept fighting when everyone else gave up. If I'm going to make this deal, I need you to sign off on it. Caleb's mind raced through the implications. Hartley as a witness could blow the case wide open, not just the sabotage campaign, but the entire corrupt network that had enabled it. Years of prosecutions, dozens of people held accountable, a genuine chance to clean up the district. But it would also mean letting Hartley walk, letting the man who had terrorized Lena, threatened Lily, burned down the cafe, escape justice. I need to think about it. I don't have time. Then make time. Caleb's voice was cold. You want my cooperation? You're going to wait while I discuss this with the people whose lives you destroyed. And if we decide the answer is no, you're going to accept it and face the consequences of your actions like a man. Hartley's jaw tightened, but he nodded. Fine. 24 hours. I'll be in touch. Hartley returned to his Mercedes and drove away, and Caleb stood alone in front of the ruined cafe, the weight of the decision pressing down on him. He called an emergency meeting that evening. Lena, Elena, Grace, and himself gathered around Lena's kitchen table, the proposal laid out in stark terms. If we accept the deal, Hartley walks, Elena said. He'll face lesser charges, maybe no charges at all, depending on how valuable his testimony proves to be. And if we don't accept? Lena asked. Then we rely on the evidence we've already gathered. Webb, Davis, the burner phone records. It might be enough to convict Hartley, or it might not. These cases are unpredictable. What about the bigger fish? The city council members, the officials who took money. Without Hartley's testimony, they'll probably stay protected. He's the linchpin, the one who can connect all the pieces. Silence fell over the table. Caleb watched Lena's face, trying to read what she was thinking. Her expression was closed, guarded, the armor back in place. This isn't fair, she said finally. He burned my cafe. He tried to destroy everything I care about, and now we're supposed to just let him go? Not let him go.
Elena said carefully. Let him help us take down something bigger. It's a trade-off. A trade-off that means he never faces real consequences. Sometimes justice looks different than we expect. Lena stood abruptly and walked to the window, her back to the room. Caleb wanted to go to her, to offer comfort, but he sensed she needed space to process. What would you do? Lena asked, not turning around. If it was your call. Elena considered the question. I'd take the deal. Not because Hartley deserves it, but because the people he can expose deserve to face justice even more. This isn't about revenge. It's about making sure this never happens to anyone else. And you, Grace? Grace's expression was unreadable. I've worked cases like this before. The big fish usually get away unless someone flips. It's ugly, but it's how the system works. Lena turned to face them, her eyes finding Caleb's. What about you? Caleb thought about everything that had happened. The blind date that had started it all, the moment Lena had offered him a seat at her table, the weeks of working side by side, falling in love, building something real. He thought about Lily and her hard questions, about Sarah and her soft goodbye, about all the ways life had broken him and all the ways he'd put himself back together. I think, he said slowly, that we didn't start this fight to get revenge. We started it because we wanted to protect what matters. And if taking Hartley's deal means protecting other families from going through what we went through, then maybe that's the real victory. Lena was quiet for a long moment. Then she closed her eyes, and when she opened them again, the decision was made. Call him. Tell him we agree. Elena nodded and reached for her phone. But Elena? Lena's voice hardened. Make sure he understands. This is a one-time offer. If he holds anything back, if he plays games, if he tries to protect himself at someone else's expense, the deal is off, and we bury him. I'll make it very clear. The call was brief. When Elena hung up, her expression was satisfied. He accepted. He'll meet with the Attorney General's team tomorrow morning. By this time next week, the whole network is going to come crashing down. Lena sank into a chair, the tension finally draining from her shoulders. It's really over. Almost. Caleb moved to her side, taking her hand. There's still the cafe to rebuild. The cafe? She laughed weakly. I almost forgot about that. Don't worry, he smiled. I know a pretty good carpenter. Despite everything, the fire, the threats, the weight of the decision they'd just made, Lena laughed, a real laugh, full and warm and alive. It was the best sound Caleb had ever heard. The weeks that followed were a whirlwind of depositions, arrests, and front-page headlines. Robert Hartley proved to be everything he'd promised, a treasure trove of information that exposed corruption reaching from the city inspector's office to the halls of city council. 15 officials were indicted. 3 council members resigned. The mayor announced a comprehensive review of every development project approved in the past decade. And through it all, Magnolia Grounds slowly came back to life. Caleb threw himself into the reconstruction with the same dedication he'd brought to the original repairs. The insurance issue was resolved. Elena had discovered that the cancellation had been orchestrated by yet another Hartley associate, and the resulting lawsuit had forced the company to reinstate coverage with a substantial settlement attached. The community rallied as well. A crowdfunding campaign organized by regular customers raised enough money to replace the destroyed equipment. Local businesses donated supplies, time, expertise. The cafe that had become a symbol of resistance became a symbol of resilience instead. Lily helped where she could, carrying supplies that weren't too heavy, offering opinions on paint colors, making sure the workers had enough lemonade. She'd grown attached to Lena in the months since they'd met, treating her with the easy familiarity of family. When are you going to ask her? Lily demanded one afternoon, cornering Caleb behind a stack of lumber. Ask who what? Daddy. Her voice carried the exasperation of a child dealing with a particularly slow adult. When are you going to ask Lena to marry you? You said you'd ask her later. It's later. Caleb glanced across the construction site to where Lena was reviewing plans with the architect, her hair tied back, her face smudged with dust, her smile bright despite the chaos surrounding her. You're right, he said. It is later. So? So maybe tonight's the night. Lily's face lit up. Really? Really? But you have to keep it a secret. I'm very good at secrets. You told Mrs. Chen about my surprise birthday party last year. That was different. This is important. Caleb laughed and ruffled her hair. Okay, Bug. It's our secret. That evening, after the workers had gone home and Lily was safely at Mrs. Chen's, Caleb found Lena on the patio. The boards he'd repaired months ago still held strong, unmarked by the fire that had ravaged the rest of the building. The tables were back, the string lights were rehung, and the magnolias were blooming white and fragrant in the evening air. Lena sat at the table where they'd first talked, her eyes closed, her face peaceful in a way he hadn't seen in months. Hey, he said softly. She opened her eyes and smiled. Hey, yourself. Mind if I sit? If you're free. The callback to their first meeting made his heart clench.
He sat across from her, the same position they'd been in the day his terrible blind date had led him to something extraordinary. Lily thinks I should ask you something. Lena's eyebrows rose. Oh? She's been very persistent about it, very direct. She gets it from you, apparently. So I've been told. Caleb reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. Lena Parker, I know this isn't the most romantic setting. I know we're surrounded by construction materials and dust and the smell of fresh paint. I know our lives are complicated and messy and nothing like what either of us planned. Lena's eyes were wide, her breath catching. But I also know that meeting you changed everything. That fighting beside you made me remember who I wanted to be. That loving you is the best thing that's happened to me since my daughter was born. He opened the box, revealing a simple diamond ring that had belonged to his mother. Lena, will you marry me? The silence stretched for an eternity. A heartbeat, a lifetime, a moment suspended in the soft evening light. Then Lena laughed, tears streaming down her face, and threw her arms around his neck. Yes, she whispered. Yes, yes, yes. He slipped the ring on her finger, and she pulled back to look at it, her expression radiant with joy. Your mother's ring? She would have loved you. I hope so. Lena wiped her eyes, laughing. I must look like a mess. You look beautiful. You're biased. Extremely. They sat together on the patio as the stars came out, the cafe rising around them, the future stretching ahead full of possibility. Caleb had walked into Magnolia Grounds looking for an escape from a bad date. He'd found something infinitely more valuable, a partner, a purpose, a place to belong. And as he held Lena's hand and watched the string lights flicker to life, he knew that whatever came next, they would face it together. The morning of the grand reopening dawned clear and bright, the kind of perfect spring day that felt like a gift from the universe. Caleb stood on the sidewalk outside Magnolia Grounds, watching the final preparations unfold with a sense of wonder that still hadn't faded despite months of work. The cafe was transformed. The rebuilding had preserved everything that mattered: the original brick facade, the wrought iron fence, the magnolia trees that had given the place its name, while adding touches of renewal that spoke to resurrection rather than mere repair. New windows caught the morning light. Fresh paint gleamed on restored woodwork. The patio where everything had started was stronger than ever, its boards solid beneath the tables and chairs that waited for customers. And above the door, a new sign hung in place of the old one: Magnolia Grounds, ST, 1984. Re-ST, 2024. Lena had insisted on the dual dates. We're not pretending the fire didn't happen, she'd said. We're proving it didn't destroy us. Now she emerged from the front door, her hair loose around her shoulders, her white blouse crisp against the morning breeze. The engagement ring on her finger caught the sunlight, throwing tiny rainbows across the restored patio. It's really happening, she said, coming to stand beside him. It's really happening. I keep expecting to wake up, to find out this was all a dream and I'm still standing in front of a burned-out building in my pajamas. Caleb took her hand. This is real. All of it. Even the part where I'm marrying a carpenter who works for coffee? Especially that part. She laughed and leaned into him, and they stood together watching their shared dream take shape as the first vendors arrived with flowers and balloons and a banner that read, "Welcome back." The community had rallied in ways neither of them had anticipated. The crowdfunding campaign had exceeded its goal by 300%. Local businesses had donated everything from coffee beans to kitchen equipment. Elena had organized a benefit concert featuring local musicians that had drawn thousands of attendees and raised enough money to pay off the remaining construction costs. Even Marcus, Caleb's well-meaning but misguided friend who had set up the disastrous blind date with Jessica, had contributed, showing up every weekend to help with demolition and reconstruction despite having no construction experience whatsoever. "I feel like I owe you," Marcus had explained, holding a hammer like he wasn't entirely sure which end to use. "If that date hadn't been so terrible, you never would have met Lena." That's a strange way to look at it. I prefer to think of it as taking credit for your happiness. The reopening was scheduled for noon, but by 11, a crowd had already gathered outside the fence. Caleb recognized many of the faces. Regular customers who had been coming to Magnolia Grounds for years, journalists who had covered the story, supporters who had contributed to the rebuilding fund. But there were new faces too, people drawn by curiosity or solidarity, or simply the promise of good coffee in a beautiful setting. Lily darted through the crowd, her small body vibrating with excitement. She'd appointed herself the unofficial greeter, welcoming everyone who approached with the confident authority of someone who considered this her second home. "Daddy, there's like 1,000,000 people out here." "Not quite 1,000,000, Bug. Close to 1,000,000. Mrs. Chen is here and she brought cookies and she says she's going to cry when Lena cuts the ribbon, but she doesn't want anyone to know, so you're not supposed to tell anyone. Your secret-keeping skills remain impressive. I told you, this is important stuff." She raced off to greet another group of arrivals, and Caleb watched her go with a warmth that never faded no matter how many times he experienced it. His daughter had blossomed over the past months, the worried child who'd asked if they were in danger, transforming into a confident girl who knew exactly where she belonged. Grace appeared at his elbow, her watchful eyes scanning the crowd out of habit despite the security measures that had been quietly put in place. "Perimeter secure. No signs of trouble." "Is that your way of saying relax?" "It's my way of saying the only thing you need to worry about today is not crying during Lena's speech." "I don't cry." "You cried when Lily lost her first tooth." "That was different. There was blood." Grace smiled, a rare expression that softened her usually stern features. "It's okay to feel things, Caleb. You've earned this moment." Before he could respond, Elena appeared, looking polished and professional despite the casual setting. Her role in bringing down the Hartley network had earned her national attention, with multiple job offers from major law firms and a standing invitation to consult on anti-corruption cases across the country. She'd turned them all down. "I found something worth staying for," she'd explained when Caleb asked about her plans. "This community, these people, they showed me what fighting for something really looks like. I'm not ready to leave that behind." Now she surveyed the scene with the satisfied expression of someone who had seen a complex operation come together exactly as planned. "The media's positioned, the officials are ready, and I've confirmed that the Attorney General's office will be represented. This is going to be front-page news." "Is that necessary?" Lena asked, joining them. "I just want to reopen my cafe. I don't need a photo op." "You're a symbol now, whether you like it or not. The woman who stood up to corruption and won. People need to see that story has a happy ending." "Does it? Have a happy ending?" Elena's expression softened. "Look around you, Lena. This isn't just a cafe reopening. It's proof that fighting back matters. That one person, one family, can make a difference against forces that seem overwhelming. The officials we exposed are facing justice. The businesses they destroyed are being compensated. The system that enabled them is being reformed." She gestured at the crowd, at the banner, at the rebuilt cafe standing proud in the morning light. "This is what victory looks like. Enjoy it." The ribbon-cutting ceremony began at exactly noon. A small platform had been set up on the patio, and Lena stood before the crowd with Caleb beside her, Lily at their feet, and a sea of faces looking up at them with expressions ranging from curiosity to joy to tearful pride. Lena had written a speech. Caleb had watched her labor over it for weeks, writing and rewriting, trying to find words that captured everything they'd been through. But when she stepped up to the microphone, she set her notes aside. "I had a speech prepared," she said, her voice carrying clearly over the assembled crowd. "Pages of carefully chosen words about resilience and community and the power of standing up for what you believe in. But standing here now, looking at all of you, I realize that none of those words are necessary. She paused, her eyes sweeping the crowd. You already know what happened. You read the articles. You followed the investigation. You watched our neighborhood become a symbol of something bigger than any of us could have imagined. You know about the corruption we exposed, the officials who were brought to justice, the changes that are being made to ensure this never happens again. Her hand found Caleb's, squeezing tight. What you might not know is that none of it would have been possible without a man who walked into this cafe for the worst blind date of his life and stayed to help a stranger who needed him. Laughter rippled through the crowd. Caleb felt heat rise to his cheeks. Caleb Reed isn't a lawyer or a journalist or a professional crusader. He's a carpenter, a single father, a man who works with his hands and loves his daughter and believes that you should help people when you can, even when it's hard, even when it costs you something. Lena turned to look at him, her eyes bright with unshed tears. He saw a problem, a structural flaw that someone had deliberately created, and instead of walking away, he fixed it. Not because anyone paid him, not because he'd get recognition or reward, but because that's who he is. He fixes things. He makes broken things whole. She turned back to the crowd. This cafe is standing today because of him. I am standing today because of him. And in a few months, when we get married in this very spot, I'll be the luckiest woman in the world. Not because I own a successful business, or because I helped expose corruption, or because my story made the news, but because I found someone who shows up every day, no matter what. The crowd erupted in applause, and Caleb pulled Lena close, kissing her while cameras flashed and people cheered and Lily tugged at their hands, demanding to be included in the moment. I didn't need a speech, he murmured against her ear. Too bad. You got one anyway. The ribbon was cut, the doors were opened, and Magnolia Grounds welcomed customers for the first time in nearly a year. The rest of the day passed in a blur of activity. Orders placed, tables filled, conversations flowing. The new espresso machine hummed where the old one had stood, producing drinks that Lena swore were even better than before. The kitchen staff moved with practiced efficiency, turning out pastries and sandwiches and the avocado toast that had become famous despite, or perhaps because of, its association with Caleb's disastrous first date. Regular customers reunited with their favorite tables. New customers discovered a space that felt like home from the moment they walked in. Children played on the patio while their parents lingered over coffee, and the magnolias swayed in the afternoon breeze, scattering white petals like confetti. By evening, the crowd had thinned, but the energy remained, a warm, contented glow that seemed to emanate from the very walls of the cafe. Caleb sat at what had become their table, watching Lena move through the space she'd fought so hard to save. She was radiant, not just beautiful, though she was that too, but alive in a way he'd rarely seen. The shadows that had haunted her during the worst of the crisis were gone, replaced by a lightness that made her seem years younger. This was what winning looked like. Not the headlines or the arrests or the official acknowledgments, but this, a woman in her element, surrounded by the community she'd built, doing the work she loved. Lily appeared at his elbow, her face smeared with chocolate from one of the celebratory cupcakes Mrs. Chen had contributed. Daddy, Mrs. Chen says you're staring at Lena like a lovesick puppy. Mrs. Chen has a lot of opinions. She says she's happy for you. She says she knew from the beginning that you two were meant to be together. Did she now? She says she's very wise and it comes with age. Caleb laughed. Go get cleaned up, Bug. We should probably head home soon. But I don't want to leave. This is the best day ever. There will be other best days. Promise? Promise. Lily hugged him fiercely, then darted off to find a napkin, leaving a chocolate smudge on his shirt that he couldn't bring himself to mind. Lena appeared in the chair across from him, the same chair where she'd been sitting the day they met. Déjà vu, she said, smiling. A little. This table is going to be famous. People will want to sit here, take photos, post on social media. The table where Caleb Reed's terrible date led to true love. Please don't make that a thing. Too late. I'm already designing the plaque. They sat in comfortable silence as the last customers filtered out. The staff began the closing routine, and the string lights flickered to life overhead. The cafe settled into the quiet hum of evening, peaceful and whole. Thank you, Lena said softly. For what?
For everything. For staying when you could have walked away. For fighting when I wanted to give up. For believing in this place, in me, when it would have been so much easier not to. Caleb reached across the table and took her hand. I should be thanking you. I was sleepwalking through life before I met you, going through the motions, existing without really living. You woke me up. I interrupted your bad date. Best interruption of my life. They laughed, and in that laughter was everything. The months of struggle, the moments of despair, the small victories and large ones, the slow rebuilding of two broken people into something stronger together than either had been alone. So what happens now? Lena asked. Now we get married. We raise Lily together. We run this cafe and drink too much coffee and argue about paint colors and grow old in a neighborhood that we helped save. That sounds remarkably domestic. I'm a remarkably domestic person. You're a carpenter who exposed a corruption network and faced down a corporate executive who threatened your daughter. In my spare time, Lena laughed again, and the sound filled the cafe like music. I love you, Caleb Reed. I love you too, Lena Parker. The weeks following the reopening settled into a rhythm that felt both new and familiar. Caleb divided his time between his carpentry work, which had expanded significantly after the publicity surrounding the case, and helping at the cafe when extra hands were needed. He'd become a fixture at Magnolia Grounds, as recognized by the regulars as Lena herself, the carpenter who'd saved their favorite coffee shop. Lily thrived in the new normal. She'd started calling Lena Mom when no one was paying attention, testing the word like someone trying on a new piece of clothing. Lena pretended not to notice, giving Lily space to adjust at her own pace, but Caleb saw how her eyes lit up every time it happened. The wedding planning proceeded with the same organic ease that had characterized their relationship from the beginning. They'd decided on a small ceremony held on the patio where they'd first met, attended by the community that had become their extended family. Mrs. Chen appointed herself the unofficial wedding coordinator, offering opinions on everything from flower arrangements to seating charts. Grace agreed to serve as security, old habits, though she'd also been invited as a guest and had surprised everyone by accepting with what might have been a smile. Elena was serving as maid of honor, a role she'd accepted with characteristic directness. I don't do sentimental speeches, but I'll make sure the legal paperwork is flawless. Marcus, still seeking absolution for the terrible blind date, had volunteered to be best man and had been practicing his toast for weeks. Every version Caleb had heard was worse than the last, filled with terrible jokes and embarrassing stories, and he was simultaneously dreading and looking forward to it. The investigation into the Hartley network continued to unfold, though the most dramatic revelations were behind them. Robert Hartley had kept his end of the bargain, providing testimony that led to more than 30 indictments and fundamentally reshaped the city's approach to development oversight. He was currently in witness protection, his empire dismantled, his brother serving 15 years for corruption and conspiracy. Gerald Hartley's sentencing had been particularly satisfying. The former inspector, who had terrorized businesses for over a decade, received a prison term of 8 years, along with lifetime bans from public service. At his hearing, Lena had delivered a victim impact statement that had been quoted in newspapers across the state. You spent 15 years convincing yourself that power meant being able to take whatever you wanted, she'd said, her voice steady and clear. But real power isn't about taking. It's about protecting, about building, about leaving the world better than you found it. She'd paused, looking directly at the broken man in the defendant's chair. You didn't destroy me. You made me stronger. And that's something you'll never be able to take away. The other business owners who had lost their livelihoods to the Hartley network were finally seeing justice as well. A class action lawsuit had resulted in a substantial settlement fund, allowing many to rebuild what they'd lost. The antique store on the corner was reopening. A new bakery was moving into the space where the old one had been forced out. The neighborhood was healing. 3 months after the grand reopening, on a perfect autumn afternoon with the magnolias turning gold and the air crisp with the promise of change, Caleb stood on the patio of Magnolia Grounds in a suit that felt slightly too formal and watched Lena walk toward him between rows of mismatched chairs filled with everyone they loved. She wore a simple white dress that caught the afternoon light, her hair loose around her shoulders, the same engagement ring glinting on her finger that she'd worn for months.
She wasn't carrying flowers. She'd said she didn't need them. But someone had tucked a magnolia blossom behind her ear, and she was more beautiful than any arrangement could have made her. Lily walked beside her, serving as both flower girl and junior bridesmaid, scattering petals with the serious concentration of someone performing a sacred duty. She'd insisted on a dress that matched Lena's, and the two of them together made something catch in Caleb's throat. His family. His future. Everything he'd thought he'd lost forever when Sarah died returned to him in a form he never could have predicted. The ceremony was brief, presided over by a friend of Elena's who had the authority to make it official and the good sense to keep things simple. There were no elaborate rituals, no lengthy readings, no processional hymns, just two people standing before their community making promises they intended to keep. "Caleb," Lena said, her voice carrying across the silent patio, "I fell in love with you because you saw me. Not the cafe owner or the crusader or the woman fighting for her mother's legacy, just me, scared and stubborn and trying to hold everything together with coffee and willpower." She took his hands, her grip firm and warm. "You didn't try to rescue me. You didn't try to fix me. You just showed up. Every day. With your tools and your steady hands and your absolute refusal to give up, even when I wanted to." Tears were streaming down her face now, but she was smiling. "I promised to show up for you the same way. Every day, for the rest of our lives. In the coffee-scented mornings and the construction-dusty evenings. In the fights and the reconciliations. In the ordinary moments that make up a life." She squeezed his hands. "I choose you, Caleb Reed. Today and always." Caleb had prepared words. He'd written them down, memorized them, practiced them in front of the bathroom mirror until they sounded right. But looking at Lena now, all of those carefully crafted sentences seemed inadequate. "Lena," he said, his voice rough with emotion, "I walked into this cafe looking for an escape from a bad date, and I found everything I didn't know I was looking for." He heard Lily giggle somewhere to his left and couldn't help smiling. "You reminded me that life is meant to be lived, not just survived. That taking risks is worth it when you're risking for something that matters. That love isn't about protecting yourself from hurt. It's about finding someone worth hurting for." He glanced at Lily, at Mrs. Chen dabbing her eyes in the front row, at Marcus trying and failing to maintain his composure, at all the faces of people who had become family. "I promised to keep showing up, to keep fixing what's broken and building what's new. To be the kind of husband you deserve and the kind of father Lily needs. To stand beside you through whatever comes next, whether that's corrupt inspectors or burnt coffee, or just the ordinary challenges of sharing a life." He lifted her hands to his lips and kissed them. "I choose you too, Lena Parker. Today and always." The officiant pronounced them married, and Caleb kissed his wife, while the crowd erupted in cheers and Lily demanded to be lifted up so she could be part of the moment. The reception spilled across the patio and into the cafe, an informal celebration that felt exactly right. Tables were pushed together, the espresso machine worked overtime, and the conversation flowed as freely as the champagne. Marcus delivered his toast, which was every bit as terrible and wonderful as Caleb had expected. "I'd like to take credit for bringing these two together," Marcus said, raising his glass. "Since technically it was my terrible matchmaking that put Caleb in this cafe in the first place. But the truth is, I had nothing to do with it. What they found, they built themselves, through hard work, stubbornness, and an absolutely unreasonable amount of optimism." He grinned at the couple. "To Caleb and Lena, may your coffee always be hot, your construction projects always come in on budget, and your love always be exactly what it is today, imperfect, hard-won, and absolutely worth fighting for." Glasses clinked. Cheers rose. And the celebration continued as the sun set over the neighborhood that had become home. Later, after the guests had gone and Lily had fallen asleep on a pile of coats in the office, Caleb and Lena stood together on the patio where everything had begun. The string lights cast their familiar glow. The magnolias rustled in the evening breeze. The tables stood in rows, witnesses to countless conversations, countless cups of coffee, countless ordinary moments that added up to something extraordinary. "Do you remember," Lena said, "what you said to me that first day? About the boards?" Caleb smiled. "I said they were sagging, that it could be nothing or it could be something. It was definitely something. Definitely. She leaned into him, her head resting against his shoulder, and they stood in comfortable silence, watching the lights dance overhead. "What do you think happens now?" she asked. The same question she'd asked months ago, with the same note of wonder and uncertainty. But this time, Caleb had a different answer. "Now we live," he said. "We run this cafe and raise our daughter and wake up every morning next to each other. We fight when we need to fight and rest when we need to rest. We have good days and bad days and ordinary days that blur together into something called a life." He turned to face her, cupping her face in his hands. "Now we get everything we earned." Lena's eyes glistened. "That sounds perfect." "It won't be perfect. It'll be messy and complicated and sometimes exhausting. I know. We'll argue about stupid things and forget anniversaries and burn dinner on nights when we're too tired to cook. I know. But we'll also have this." He gestured at the cafe, at the patio, at the world they'd built together. "We'll have coffee every morning and Lily's terrible jokes and Mrs. Chen's unsolicited advice. We'll have Elena calling with updates on cases we're tangentially connected to and Grace dropping by to make sure our security systems are updated. We'll have a community that showed up when it mattered and never stopped showing up." He kissed her forehead. "We'll have each other." Lena pulled him close, and they swayed together in the quiet night, not quite dancing but not quite still. Two people who had found each other against impossible odds and refused to let go. Inside the cafe, Lily stirred on her pile of coats, murmuring something about banana sharks. The espresso machine sat silent, waiting for morning. The new sign over the door. Magnolia Grounds, Esten 1984, Re-EST. 2024 gleamed in the string lights, and on the patio, surrounded by everything that mattered, Caleb Reed held his wife and thought about how far they'd come, from a terrible blind date to a chance encounter, from structural repairs to exposing corruption, from two broken people protecting themselves from hurt to a family choosing love every day despite the risks. It wasn't a fairy tale. It was better. It was real. Earned through struggle and built with care, like a house made to last. As the night deepened and the stars emerged overhead, Caleb finally understood what he'd been building all along. Not just a cafe, not just a case, a home. The next morning, Caleb woke to the smell of coffee and the sound of his daughter's laughter drifting up from downstairs. Sunlight streamed through the window of the apartment above Magnolia Grounds. Their apartment now, the three of them together. He found Lena and Lily in the cafe kitchen, engaged in what appeared to be a very serious conversation about the proper ratio of chocolate chips to pancake batter. "Daddy says too much chocolate is unhealthy," Lily was explaining. "Daddy is wrong," Lena replied solemnly. "There's no such thing as too much chocolate." "I can hear you," Caleb said from the doorway. "You were meant to." Lena grinned at him, and in that grin was everything. Love and mischief and the promise of countless mornings just like this one. He joined them at the counter, accepting the cup of coffee Lena pressed into his hands, watching his daughter help mix the batter with more enthusiasm than skill. Through the window, he could see the patio where he'd proposed, the tables where customers would soon gather, the magnolias that had witnessed everything, from the first conversation to the wedding ceremony to this quiet morning after. "Happy?" Lena asked, sliding an arm around his waist. Caleb thought about the question. He thought about Sarah, who would always be part of him, about the years of grief and survival, the sleepless nights and the mechanical days, about a blind date gone wrong and a woman who'd offered him a seat at her table. He thought about everything that had led him here, to this kitchen, this family, this life. "Yeah," he said, pulling his wife close while his daughter added another handful of chocolate chips to the batter. "I really am." Outside, the first customers of the day were gathering at the gate, drawn by the smell of coffee and the promise of something good. The neighborhood was waking up, another ordinary morning in an extraordinary place. And inside Magnolia Grounds, surrounded by everyone he loved, Caleb Reed finally understood what it meant to come home.